My pleasure to join the workshop to exchange views on China's market overview and entry strategies. I'm Laura Yang from Singapore Enterprise Center. Let me share my screen. Okay. Today, my presentation includes 5 parts. First, overview of China market and business landscape. Second, overall new trends and sectors with potential for growth. Number 3, business culture and brand perception. Number 4, market entry policies, barriers, and success factors. And number 5, Singapore Enterprise Center and services. Part 1, China remains the world's second largest economy, and its economic growth rate is at a high level among world's major economic bodies. Look at the distribution of the GDP in China in 2021 by industry. The industrial sector generated almost 32.6% of China's GDP. It was by far the largest contributor, followed by the wholesale and retail industry that was responsible for 9.7%, and the financial sector that produced 8.0% of the country's economic output. The services sector accounted for 53.3% of China's GDP by 2021. Overview of China market. I summarized the 4 features. The first one, the fastest growing major economy. The rising prominence of the Chinese business sector is illustrated by the fact that Chinese companies account for 143 of Fortune Global 500 firms in year 2021. The number includes those from the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and the island of Taiwan, making China number 1 on the list for a second consecutive year. China continues to be an attractive and reliable investment destination. China saw record high FDI inflows, topping RMB 1 trillion last year, driven by strong services FDI. A growing consumer base. China's still growing consumer class is the engine for global growth. China displays a high consumption pattern in areas such as fashion, accessories, consumer electronics, and electrical vehicles in proportion to its share of national GDP. A spirit of innovation. The World Intellectual Property Organization believes that China has changed from a major technology user to a technology producer, and technological innovation has gradually become an important driving force for China's economic growth. Improving business environment. China has been taking concrete and effective measures to open its door wider, including the simplified business registration procedures, the introduction of foreign investment law, favorable tax schemes, as well as liberation of specific industries. I will further elaborate the foreign investment law in part 4. The growth drivers include consumption upgrading, digital transformation, innovation, and integrated regional economic development. There are, however, some downward pressures, including ongoing pandemic, geopolitical tensions, uncertainties in the real estate sector, and the rollout of carbon reduction policies in various industries. China's business landscape. China is often grouped into 4 markets: the North, East, South, and West. China also has some integrated regional economic development strategies, mainly include integrated development of Yangtze River Delta, Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei Integrated Development Plan, the Guangdong-Hong Kong-Macau Great Bay Area, and the construction of Chengdu-Chongqing economic circles. Chinese cities are ranked according to a tier system based upon factors such as their population, GDP, economic growth rate, cultural and historical significance. For tier 1 cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangdong, Shenzhen, there are better infrastructure and more sophisticated distribution channels, as well as the largest concentration of affluent and middle-class consumers. As the markets are better developed for some products, there may be issues of market saturation with increasing logistic costs, rate, and competition. Tier 2 and in some cases, tier 3 cities have the potential to be the main growth markets in the future. However, in some cities, there are considerable logistical issues, including less well-developed infrastructure and a lack of cold chain storage. Lower tier cities are often targeted mainly by some domestic companies, and the challenges faced for establishing efficiency distribution and marketing for products will be higher than in large urban centers. Look at the top 10 Chinese cities ranked by GDP in 2021. Shanghai ranked first, followed by Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Chongqing, Suzhou, Chengdu, Hangzhou, Wuhan, and Nanjing, according to the National Bureau of Statistics of China. Part 2, overall new trends and sectors with potential for growth. There are mainly 4 trends of China's economic outlook. The rising middle class. The increase in income has led to a rising middle class in China. Some of the leading spending sectors are healthcare, education, mortgage, elder care, and car purchasing. Consumption driven. Among other priorities, China reconfirmed its commitment to transition the country to a consumption and a service-driven growth model over the next 10 years. Digital economy. Digital economy become a new growth driver of the country's economic growth amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And aging. China is aging rapidly. The aging trend presents opportunities as well as challenges. The primary feature of the next decade may very well be the impact of sweeping demographic and social change that is coinciding with the rapid march of technology. China demographic trends. There are the declining birth rates. The birth rate in China dropped to a record low of 7.52 per 1,000 people in 2021. The previous year, this figure was 8.552 as per the National Bureau of Statistics data. As the country faces the dual problem of a rapidly aging population and a shrinking workforce, the Chinese government has ramped up its efforts to encourage people to have more children. Aging population. China is aging rapidly. According to the latest census data, Chinese people aged 60 or above account for 18.7% of the total population. And the people aged 65 or above accounting for 13.5% of the total population. The census results showed China is aging more rapidly than previously thought. Smaller household. The size of the average household in China has shrunk by almost 30% over the past 20 years, reflecting falling total fertility and the fact that people are tending to delay marriage and have children later. Today, between 15 and 20% of Chinese households are single-person ones, more than double the share in 1999. The number of single adults has now topped 240 million, and they are driving a robust singles economy, reflecting the rising prevalence of singles. For instance, pet ownership in China has more than doubled in just 5 years. Catering to people exercising and even entertaining themselves alone, there are now one-person gym modules and mini karaoke booths in China. The rise of digital natives. So-called digital natives between 1980 and 2012, including members of Generation Z and millennials, accounting for nearly 40% of the Chinese population. They are indigenous netizens representing the most powerful force in the Chinese consumer market. The mobile internet has become an indispensable part of their daily life. Let's look at the 6 groups of Chinese consumer profile and behavior. Understanding the preferences and mindsets of different consumer groups in China is key to emerging or expanding further into the Chinese market. Number 1, high net worth individuals. Those consumers are usually the first or second generation of China's total social elite with high disposable incomes and predominantly concentrated in China's Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities. Marketing campaigns for products targeting these consumers often emphasize the exclusivity of the product or themes of success and luxury, and this segment can often act as trendsetters for other social segments. Number 2, affluent consumers. The affluent consumers represent the upper end of the middle class and are an important demographic in both higher and lower tiered cities. More and more affluent consumers are traveling, studying, or working abroad, and with exposure to Western lifestyle and culture, they are more likely to have adopted new eating and drinking practices, as well as a preference for high quality imported products. They have an increasing concern of a healthy lifestyle and desire for high quality and safe products. Number 3, middle class consumers. They are an important demographic in Tier 1 and 2 cities, as well as having significant purchasing power in Tier 3 and 4 cities, where lower salaries are offset by lower living costs. These consumers may purchase more expensive products on an occasional basis if they are savvy in their spending or have specific preferences picked up from previous dining or travel experiences. They will also purchase mid-price range products more frequently for daily or frequent consumption. Marketing should tap into the dual desire for trading up and also for healthier lifestyle with quality and safety assurances. Young consumers born in the 1980s or after 1990s and have grown up in an increasingly outward-looking China and cosmopolitan cities, and with widespread access to the internet. The new demographic is the most likely to have adopted a certain westernized lifestyle and are increasingly open to try new products. Senior consumers. The over 60s are expected to account for around 1/4 of China's population by 2030. By the end of 2020, Chinese over 30s accounted for more than 11% of the country's internet users, almost doubling their share in only 9 months because of the pandemic. Ali Research reported that the number of seniors' monthly average users of one of the largest e-commerce platforms in China grew year on year about 30 percentage points faster than other age groups in 2020. The aging of China's population and the consumption opportunities are well appreciated by many companies and investors. Chinese technology companies are increasingly adjusting their offerings to seniors to tap into their embrace of digital. Female consumers. The purchasing power of female consumers in China is being recognized across industry, with spending during the pandemic demonstrating the extent of financial resources held by many Chinese women. Female consumers currently account for 3 out of 4 purchases in China, from cosmetics to fashion, health and fitness to gaming, travel and luxury goods. Female consumers are investing in self-improvement and crafting their own public image. I identified the 6 sectors with potential for growth. Healthcare continues to expand rapidly, driven by an aging population, economic growth, and an expanding basic health insurance. Second, Number two, e-commerce. China has the world's biggest online population. The coronavirus pandemic has accelerated the growth of online shopping. Number three, pet economy. The pet economy in China is booming, and it is estimated to reach a market size of 445 billion RMB by 2023. Number four, luxury goods. China's luxury goods market finished 2021 with strong double-digit growth overall, with some brands exceeding a 70% increase. Number five, night economy. With the Chinese economy slowing down amid COVID-19, the night economy strategy is highly encouraged by the government to boost the growth. Number six, food and beverage. As the world's largest food importer and consumer, China's net demand for imported F&B products shows no sign of waning. Number seven, EV cars. China represents 40% of world spending on EVs, and the investment in these products continues to grow at a rate of more than 7 times faster than the average global rate. And number eight, vocational training. China's vocational education sector presents promising opportunities for foreign investors. Part three, business culture and brand perception. Chinese business culture is rooted in a distinctive philosophical and cultural heritage dating back thousands of years. The business culture in China has been constantly evolving due to the social, political, and economic development in recent decades. First, the historical background. There are three elements: Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Chinese culture is unique and consistent, molded by a tradition of 5,000 years of history, including more than 20 years of uninterrupted influence of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism that together influence today's traditional Chinese cultural values. For example, the main foundation of Confucianism emphasizes duty, sincerity, loyalty, honor, respect for age and seniority. As the individuals maintain harmonious relations among themselves, society itself becomes stable. Among the most prominent legacies of the Confucian doctrine are the higher power distance and hierarchical relationships in Chinese society. In China, rank and seniority are very important in business relations, especially when dealing with state-owned enterprises and government bodies. The elements of traditional culture, but also of communist ideology and more recently, Western values. There are several elements of the business culture. First, faith means China is a collectivist society in which social harmony is of utmost importance. Faith reflects one's social esteem and the way one is regarded in society and in interpersonal interactions. Public disagreement is a faith-losing act for many people. Chinese people prefer articulating the intentions in an indirect manner and leaving room for negotiations in private. And number two, 关系. 关系 is pervasive in Chinese society. Some people tend to look for 关系 connected relationships as they may save time in secure business opportunities. However, 关系's importance is becoming less critical as Chinese business transitions from labor and manufacturing to technology. Simply knowing someone is not enough anymore. You must be able to bring something to the table. A prominent business person will not work with someone only because they know each other. And there are also modesty and connectivism. We have three advices on business practices. First, be aware of cultural and business etiquette in China. For example, exchanging business cards is another key part of introduction. A business card is regarded as an extension of the person. So treat the business card carefully The polite thing to do is accept the beans card with both hands and look at it carefully as you do so. Second, understand ethnic diversity and cultural sensitivities. Although China is predominantly Han, there are over 50 recognized ethnic minorities within China. Prior to entering a new market, research should assess if dietary restrictions for other minority groups will have a significant effect on the local market. Number three, understanding territorial sovereignty. Foreign companies have to walk a fine line when it comes to matters of a politically or culturally sensitive nature. This is especially true when it comes to territorial sovereignty, referring to Hong Kong, Taiwan, or Tibet as countries, whether on a product or in a social media post, can lead to intense criticism from consumers and the government, and even boycotts. Companies find that they have little resources but to apologize if they wish to undo the damage to their brand and remain in the market. Brand perception. McKinsey China Consumer Survey suggests Chinese consumers tend to have only 2 to 3 brands in mind when they set out to buy a product, and nearly 60% of final purchases are sourced from brands in this group. Improving brand perception and top-of-mind awareness is vital. Other findings include consumers sometimes are blurring between local and foreign. Many believe that global brands with a long-standing presence in China, such as Olay, are local brands. On the other hand, Chinese brands that have packaged themselves as international are often mistaken as foreign. Across the majority of categories surveyed, brand origin matters less than before. Consumers today have very clear expectations, and they apply to local and foreign brands alike. First and foremost, they want value for money. That's followed by quality products. They want their unique tastes catered to. And lastly, they demand good after-sales services. Cost is less of a concern among today's consumers. I find very little study on Chinese consumers' perception of Singapore brands. I did a small survey which showed, however, a low level of awareness of Singapore brands. Many do not know some household brands, for example, BreadTalk, TWG, Osim, Meizhenxiang are Singapore brands. For those who know Singapore brands of food and consumer goods, they regard the products safe, trustworthy, and middle end. There are some good practices to enhance brand perception. First, integration both online and offline touch points to create an omni-channel experience that meets the changing needs of consumers. And the second, introduces innovative service models. Part 4, market entry policies, barriers, and the success factors. China introduced a new foreign investment law effective on January 1st, 2020, which is a concrete measure taken by Chinese government to level the playing field for foreign investors and safeguard their interests in China. The new law featuring equality and legality ensures foreign invested companies equal access to government supporting policies, fundraising, and business opportunities in all walks of life. And for the biggest concern of most foreign companies, the law bans the practice of forced technology transfers to further protect intellectual property rights. The law stipulates that China will adopt a pre-establishment national treatment system and a negative list for foreign investments. Pre-establishment national treatment, it means that at the stage of investment access, foreign investors enjoy the same favorable policies and treatments with their counterpart of domestic companies. And For the negative list sets out the industries in which foreign investors are prohibited from investment or in which the extent or form of foreign investment will be restricted. Such restrictions include a limit on the percentage of foreign shareholding or the form of the foreign invested company. For example, limited to a Sino-foreign equity or cooperative joint venture. For industries not within the negative list, the government will grant the foreign investment national treatment. I will later take education sector for an example in my later slides to further elaborate the negative list. For market entry barrier and success factors, China can be a challenging place to do business and further complicated by the COVID-19 worldwide pandemic. Companies should consider their resources, previous experience, and the long-term business strategy before entering the Chinese market. The common barriers and challenges are regulatory requirements, localization, and competition. There are some strategies. The first one is understand the local regulations and collaboration. Every company coming to China will not only face with a variety of new and diverse consumer behaviors compared to other markets, but also unknown regulatory requirements and legal frameworks. Hence, collaboration with local advisors or in-market experts is recommended in order to avoid any irregular situation that can harm a business integration into the new market. Number two, adapt to local. Understand the local customers' preferences and behavior and adapt products to meet local needs. Innovation. Due to a massive number of foreign companies coming into China, competition has risen. Considering that Chinese consumers have increasingly been attracted by foreign brands, innovation is now needed more than ever before in order to stand out from the crowd on the Chinese market. Finally, protect your intellectual property rights. Firms and companies should take steps to protect their intellectual property rights under Chinese law before entering the Chinese market. Chinese government works with the first to file system, meaning that the first applicant to file the trademark will be assimilated as the real business owner. It's recommended to cooperate with an IP registration agent or lawyers to register your trademark before entering the Chinese market. I will analyze three sectors. First, F&B. China's food and beverage market is faster growing. Demand for imported products continues to be strong, driven by urbanization and the increase in disposable income of the middle class. There are generally several modes of entering the China market, which is general trade, cross-border e-commerce, and food services by setting up a physical presence. General Administration of Customs of China data shows that over the last decade, China's food import trade grew at an average annual rate of 17.4%. While China offers vast opportunities in the F&B industry, brands entering the market need to be conscious of potential challenges. For example, regulatory framework and food safety laws, compliance with customs procedures, IP protection, adapting to consumers' evolving needs and preferences, and localization. Success factors might include protect your IP before entering the market, conduct market research, and engage with consumers on the ground to create or customize products that can satisfy consumers' rapidly evolving needs and preferences. Work with agents or partner with local operators to develop correct strategies for the market. Next, the education and enrichment. China's education industry is a highly sensitive area for foreign investment. This is mainly due to how closely intertwined it is with Chinese ideology and identity, and its propensity to influence children's beliefs, resulting in foreign investors engaging in education in China usually being faced with closer scrutiny. According to the negative list, the education industry can be divided into 3 categories. Number 1, compulsory education institutions, including primary and middle schools, and the religious training institutions. They are considered prohibited areas. Number 2, for preschool educational institutions, vocational training, high schools, and tertiary education institutions, foreign investors are allowed to invest in the form of China foreign joint venture, in which foreign majority ownership is allowed, but only when the Chinese party is in a leading position. That is to say, the principal or key administration officer in such institutions is required to be a Chinese national, and the council, the board of directors, or joint administration committee of the school must be majority Chinese. And then number 3, for international school for the children of foreigners, foreign investors are allowed to set up wholly foreign-owned schools. In 2021, China announced double reduction policies, and it has a significant impact on China's education and training sector. The highlight of the policies include China banned for-profit tutoring in subjects on the school curriculum in an effort to ease pressure on children and parents. Online tutoring companies in China can no longer employ foreign tutors based outside of China for core curricular subjects like math, science, and English. Institutions teaching classes within the scope of core education are also not permitted to use any international courses or foreign textbooks. Tutoring centers cannot hold offline or online training for preschool students, including foreign language education. And the guidelines specifically ban foreign investment in such firms via mergers and acquisitions, franchise development, and variable interest entities, VIEs, which are those are investment vehicles frequently used by foreign investors in the past to bypass restrictions in China's education sector. The guidelines mark China's efforts to rein in the country's private education industry, reassert the role of government-run schooling, and improve school life balance for families. The move aims in part to alleviate costs for families, thereby encouraging them to have more children, as well as to reduce stress on students. It comes after the government released the census results in May 2021, showing that the country is aging even more rapidly than previously thought. Despite the new restrictions, foreign-run education firms still have opportunities in areas like vocational education. This is a sector explicitly encouraged for foreign investment, as well as university partnerships. The vocational education sector is steadily opening to foreign investors. The 2021 negative lists for foreign investment permit wholly foreign-owned enterprises to establish vocational training institutions in China's free trade zones without a domestic partner. China's vocational education sector shows promising opportunities for foreign investors. The investment banking firm Morgan Stanley predicts that government support and market demand will see the vocational education market grow at a compound annual growth rate of 7% in the decade from 2020 to 2030. And the retail and lifestyle. The new generations of consumers exhibit a strong dependence on smartphones and social media, reliance on key opinion consumers, KOC, and key opinion leaders, KOLs, in making purchasing decisions, pride in domestic brands, preference for smart products, and visual attractiveness, attention to product attributes related to health, entertainment, and experience, and a willingness to pay extra for high quality. Their attitudes toward digital technologies, lifestyle, and shopping experience create both opportunities and challenges for traditional firms. We summarize the 3 entry strategies, include omni-channel marketing. Affected by the COVID-19, consumers' huge demand for home delivery has awakened, which further promotes the extensive development of China omni-channel marketing. And the second, explore emerging opportunities in lower-tier cities. China's lower-tier cities continue to boast untapped potential. Alibaba's earnings report stated that 70% of new users of its retail marketplaces came from 3rd and lower-tier cities. And this, number 3, collaborate with local partners. Local companies can contribute valuable resources, such as business networks, government relations, and the knowledge of local market conditions. And finally, part 5, Singapore Enterprise Center and Services. The Singapore Enterprise Center is a one-stop business services center assisting Singapore companies to venture to China. SEC is established by the Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also get support from Enterprise Singapore. Singapore Enterprise Center at Shanghai and the Singapore Enterprise Center at Chengdu offer a suite of integrated services, including business advisory, marketing information, and business matching. We provide in-market support for Singapore companies to venture to China. Our one-stop services include marketing information, sharing of China-related marketing information and business intelligence, business advisory, providing one-to-one advisory services, addressing business-related queries specific to the China market. Within cooperation, we cooperate with local government, which can provide free virtual address for company to register in Shanghai and Chengdu. And we also provide shared secretary services. Number 4, business matching, identifying and matching companies with potential partners. Here comes our contact information. If you have any future inquiries, feel free to drop us an email. And thank you.
Can you hear me, right? Okay, I have about 15 minutes on this subject. What is great is Laura has, shared with you very important information. I'm not gonna repeat what she has said. I will just concentrate on franchising instead of, the whole of China. Okay, so a quick overview. I'm not sure if you all know the Chinese name of the CCI, or 中国连锁经营协会. And not that you don't know, but I would just like to emphasize that, in Taiwan, they use 连锁 more than 特许. Okay, and we also know, a 连锁, meaning it's a chain store, need not necessarily be a franchise, okay? Because the chain store might be just owned by one person, okay? Whereas we dare to say that a franchise normally is a 连锁, meaning a franchise is a chain, but a chain may not be a franchise, okay? So just to get it out, okay? So China Franchising Association, they call it China Chain and Franchise Association. They're extremely active. I remember 30 years ago when I first spoke at the first franchise seminar in Xiamen with Mao Zhuhui, okay, the CCPIT there. One gentleman put up his hand and said that, you know, Jiang Xiansheng, that's my name, Jiang Xiansheng, 为什么你用这个名字叫特许? Because in Chinese, 特许 means special permission. And at that time, they say that 特许, you know, the immediate thought is 军火, you know, 大炮, you know, because special permission is almost like a military operation, you know. And then another question is, if I were to become a franchisee, why am I paying the franchisor? You know, why should I? Because I'm promoting the franchisor's brand, you know. Then we have to go into very deep explanation and tell them that, you know, actually, you know, you actually cut short the learning curve, you're tapping on the knowledge of the franchisor, you know, the brand name, etc., etc. But now, 30 years later, since the first seminar we did at Xiamen, China has the world's largest franchise show, much bigger than America, much bigger than the one in Paris. The Paris franchise show is already the best in Europe. Okay, I go to 30 over shows, franchise shows every year. So I can tell you the best show, the most acknowledged, biggest franchise show right now is in Beijing, followed by Shanghai. So you can imagine how fast China has caught up, yeah? And the association there really plays ball. They actually come up with, you know, 100强, okay? They list the top 100 franchise companies. And of course, the last 2 years, meaning 2021 and 2020, the survey were not as intensive, okay? But basically, by reading the 100强 report, you can realize that, you know, the franchising is still very, very popular, and still, in spite of so-called, you know, black sheep there, you know, and in spite of even, you know, big brands like Luckin Coffee. I'm sure you know Luckin Coffee was even invested by our GIC, you know, and the Chinese name for Luckin is Rui Xing, right? You know, Rui Xing, and it's a very interesting case study, which we'll talk more later. So in 2019, you can see that, you know, the contribution was about 504 billion yuan, yeah, and year-on-year increase of 17.3%. I put up the famous ones, like for example, when it comes to convenience store, it's not 7-Eleven, it's 美一家, you know, so the Chinese name is there. And then when it comes to real estate, it's Deyu, you know, so. And there are other, like fashion, as what Laura has shared just now in great detail. You know, the young people, especially Generation Z and the millennials, they are very savvy. And again, this is what I hope our association in Singapore will also be able to do. They even have very credible data on, you know, how franchising has contributed to the economy in China. Grateful to say that in Singapore, such data are still not so available. Yeah. So it even shows that, you know, the top 100 franchising companies, they employ about 4 million people, you know, and the contribution, etc., etc. And the 4 companies with, there were 4 companies with 10,000 stores. You know, I think in Singapore, let's use Ya Kun for example, 60 over stores, and it's like, wow, you know, and then, you know, Subway with 100 over stores is wow, But in China, you know, it's very small, the number, yeah. So because of the size of the country and, you know, the potential of the market, yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, now one of very interesting, the one that sells duck necks, Jue is in Singapore. I don't know how many people have tasted the food there, but a lot of people look at the necks and they don't want to eat already, but it's a delicacy. Yeah. Okay, and then I won't go into details, but basically they are very there are lots of information. In fact, I sort of printed up, you know, like for example, they list the 100 强, right? They actually go column by column and tell you how many are corporate-owned stores and how many are franchise stores and what is their turnover. Like I said, in Singapore, you know, even if we ask, let's say Ya-Kun, you know, or Mei Zhenxiang, or even let's say Mind Chan, the numbers are not available. They won't tell you. Yeah. So as one of my fellow EXCO will tell you, we are now trying to push for a registrar so that, you know, we get franchise companies that operate in Singapore to submit. You know, even in Malaysia, they have a registrar and they're able to, you know, have the muscle to ask for information. In Singapore, it's very, very tough. Singaporeans are by nature quite secretive. I don't know why. Okay, so this has been shared by Laura already, so I won't, you know, steal her thunder. She really shared a lot of very important information. Okay. Now in China, as I said earlier on, their show is really humongous. Okay, I think it reflects on the passion and the work ethics. Okay, if you go to previously, like when I first started 33 years ago in franchising, Washington DC was the biggest franchise show. And now, if you go to America, they split it into very small shows in Los Angeles, you know, in Miami, in New York, you know. And the franchisors there, no matter how big, you know, even 5 guys and what have you, they will just have a desk and they have some canvas behind. So they don't bother to decorate, okay? Whereas if you go to China, you know, they really make the booth look really nice, as close to, you know, a restaurant, if, you know, as possible. Yeah. So, and they also do, this year they have reduced from 3 shows to 2 shows, but they still do their national convention, okay? And I've had the privilege to speak several times at their show. Like this year, May 29 will be their convention. And then, as I showed earlier, they have, there are 2 shows in Beijing and Shanghai. Worth going to take a look, okay? Now, as I said earlier on, the association is called China Chain Store and Franchise Association. As far as franchise companies are concerned, there are 400. And then this is not inclusive of the chain stores that don't franchise. Okay, and you can see that F&B, as far as memberships are concerned, F&B takes 40%, you know, followed by retail 25%, you know, and then preschool 5%, etc. Okay, auto-related, interestingly, is 15%. So, you know, owning a car, as you know, is also a status kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, so with my remaining time, I'll just share some key learnings. This is also from the EXCO, from CCFA. So it's not something I invented. I actually sought their input. So they basically say that the biggest factor is the 成活率, the sustainable growth. Because as I mentioned earlier on Ruixing, something that has been invested by many big players like GIC even failed. So a lot of them are quite concerned about the sustainability. Okay. So track record, number of years in operation, franchisee renewal rate, the number of stores, and the duration of franchise contract. So if you are in franchising, just beware that these are some of the things that are of big concern. Okay, and the detail about how many survive more than 20 years, etc., are there. Okay, then another key thing which Laura in her slides emphasizes digitization. Okay, and finally improper competition. Okay, later on in the afternoon, when I have my panel of experts, we will also go into some of the things brands have done right, some of the lessons learned and what have you. Okay, so I will not go into detail. So the latest update from CCFA, like I said, because of the 2 years of pandemic, but still they were very kind. They sent me some of the latest info. So they say that the average single store turnover of the top 100 franchise companies generally decreased. Okay, it's about 13.7%. But however, nearly 30% of these brands have a slight increase in the average single store turnover. And these are mainly concentrated in the daily necessities, common sense, because, just like now the feng shui in Shanghai, all the daily necessities are very important. And then home-related services and the automotive aftermarket. And the brands that are representative are the Maker, Meijia, and then Huasun and Tupperware. Okay, this has been shared by Laura to some extent, so I'll elaborate. And I'm not going to steal the thunder from Baker McKenzie because they will go into, related regulations. But definitely, if you go into the website, there's this 商业特许经营信息管理, very comprehensive, very, very comprehensive. Okay. So with that, I will end my session and then welcome you to send questions to the panel later. Yeah.
Kind of a background in terms of what the legal framework is in China when it comes to franchising. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I think another thing that I'll try to do, I think, during the presentation is also to give people some sort of a few practical tips in terms of sort of how foreign franchisors have sort of entered the market. I think overall, you will see from the set of slides is that the regulatory framework on franchising in China actually is, I would say, if we compared it to sort of what is happening across the world, it tends to be on the regulation heavy side. I think the only regimes where I've seen where the franchising regulations when it comes to sort of the protection of franchisees, disclosure requirements, government, right, reporting, recordal, cooling off period. I think all of those things tend to be on sort of the regulation heavy side. I think it's probably the comparable regimes are probably what you have for franchising in the US and in Canada, where there's a lot of extensive work that needs to be done, right, with your sort of legal advisors or by the in-house department of these sort of large franchisors themselves, whether you're a hotel or or sort of an F&B operation or some sort of retail operation. Again, sort of on this particular overview slide, I won't spend too much time on it other than to say, obviously, franchising is a very attractive way for foreign companies to enter the Chinese market, right? Because if you look at sort of the arc of sort of foreign investment in China over the last 40 plus years, I think franchising as a phenomenon has only been probably relevant for the last kind of 15 or so. I mean, government first started issuing regulations on franchising around 2005, with the current regs being in place since about 2007, 2008 kind of time frame. I mean, certainly before then, right, many sort of foreign players entered the Chinese market, but typically it was on a JV or direct operation model, right? So it wasn't until the last 15, 20 years that I would say smaller to medium players, right? Brand companies, people that wanted to enter China through a structure that is a little bit less demanding in terms of their ability to hire people here, directly operate, and to sort of bear all the attendant costs. So franchising is becoming, I think, more and more of an attractive way to sort of operate, especially I think for smaller and sort of medium-sized businesses. My sort of talk will also cover a little bit about sort of two models for franchising. One is onshore and one is sort of cross kind of border. I think at the end of this slide, you will see that, an onshore model really means that, companies that probably have been here for a long time, they've directly operated a number of stores, and therefore they can satisfy sort of the rules under the franchising regulations. And I think that to the sub-franchise, further to sort of domestic franchisees. I think, again, some of the advantages of an onshore model is relatively obvious, right? You definitely have more control of the business. For F&B, you can have a central sort of kitchen, right? And you can direct the management of these sort of franchisees in a much more kind of detailed way. Again, I think onshore franchising also allows you to receive payment in sort of local currency in RMB. It is overall a little bit easier than sort of getting payments on a sort of cross-border basis when your franchisees need to convert local currency into foreign exchange, and the foreign exchange regime is still relatively restrictive. So that that does mean that sort of cross-border franchises typically have a bit more difficulty in terms of sort of ensuring sort of a smoother kind of remittance of kind of various sort of fees from the local franchisee. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think the next two slides again is just to give you a flavor of sort of the offshore franchisors and the onshore franchisors. And what you will see from this is that, right, it's largely, I think, consistent with the prior presenters sort of data, right? Mostly F&B, but also hotel business, also retail business. You can see some sort of fashion brands, in there, but I think also increasingly, right, you sort of do see things that are kind of sort of auto related, like it could be like a shop to sort of a car wash, sort of a setup. I think education has also been very popular, but except I think the last, I would say, year and a half, there's been a bit of a crackdown on sort of Bushiban, right, on sort of tutoring classes, targeting sort of children. So that's probably taken a bit of a hit. Real estate sort of agencies are also a popular way for foreign companies to sort of sort of get their brand sort of into China. So I think that our experience here is pretty consistent with the data that was sort of presented earlier. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think here I won't spend too much time, but I think just to give you a flavor of what the definition of a franchise is under Chinese law. I think that the thing to keep minded is really that, again, it's not going to be a surprise to anyone, right? The key is that you have to operate the business under a uniform model of operation. So just because you're extending a brand license to a licensee in China, right, and they might be sort of selling something under a brand that you've created, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a franchise under sort of Chinese law. I mean, so the most obvious ones are really kind of the F&B businesses and maybe some of the fashion retail businesses, right? Because there has to be this very sort of consistency in terms of how the operation is actually run, right? So if you look at a fast food outlet, right, it's down to the supplies they purchase, that you can require them to purchase from specified vendors, the uniform they wear, for the employees, the menu, right, the exact types of sets of food that they serve. So I think on the F&B side, right, so like a McDonald's or a Dairy Queen, right, that's really the kind of a very classic kind of, sort of model for sort of franchising. And that's really what the rules here are trying to sort of capture. Next slide, please. Again, the qualification requirements, I think one thing, maybe I'll step back just a little bit to say that, look, the qualification requirements for franchising, this registration with the government, into this government sort of franchising sort of, online system, the rules are actually exactly the same when it comes to, cross-border franchising versus onshore sort of franchising. And because they're exactly the same, actually, sometimes I think cross-border franchisors have run into some difficulty in terms of how you comply with these rules. So on this slide, there's an example of that, the fact that for you to, satisfy the rules to be able to register your franchise, right? The franchisor has to have a minimum of 2 self-operated stores with more than a year of business operation. So a natural question would be for a foreign franchisor is that, well, how do you comply with that rule if you've never been in China in the first place, right? If you haven't bothered to set up self-operated stores. So at least in our experience, right, it does mean that foreign franchisors have had a much longer time frame or more difficult time in terms of registering their franchises. So just for example, how do you satisfy the 2+1 rule? I mean, our experience is that you can actually, sort of nominate 2 self-operated stores somewhere else outside of China, right? And to use that to show that you've operated those 2 self-operated stores for more than 1 year. But again, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, and sort of the fact that the Ministry of Commerce and the local commerce commissions, their sort of actual practical practice in terms of how they enforce these rules can vary a little bit. Some of our clients have had some difficulty in terms of demonstrating, sort of compliance with this 2+1 rule. For example, they will say, okay, just show me the 2 audited financials of 2 of your stores. Right, that sounds very, very simple. But then for a lot of franchisors, you say, "Hey, wait a minute. I actually, I've 50 stores, 100 stores. Each store is just a branch. It may not have a standalone audited financial, right? So you then need to kind of work out those sort of issues to sort of saying, okay, can you then prepare, sort of standalone sort of financials for those 2 stores only?" So those are the kind of issues you have to deal with on a cross-border basis, where if you look at the rules, they seem kind of simple enough and sort of easy to comply with. But when it comes to kind of actual practice and implementation, I think, you could run into some real difficulty. Next slide, please. Again, here is sort of what I was alluding to earlier in terms of this kind of regulation-heavy, right, framework. Right, that you have to disclose specified business operation information to franchisees at least 30 days before executing the franchise agreement. So again, you have to keep a record, right? You can't, I mean, this is all to sort of protect kind of franchisees so that you don't kind of just shove an agreement, a standard template agreement in front of them and they have to sign it. And right, and they really don't know anything about kind of the fees you're charging, how you do your business. So again, when you look at these rules, I think the framework to look at them from is really to understand, okay, this is all really in some ways, right, kind of sort of mirroring some of the US and sort of Canadian rules. Is how do you sort of protect the franchisee from sort of fraudulent disclosure, withholding of key information, right? And then you have this franchise disclosure document where you have to disclose in detail sort of how you, sort of how you run your franchise. And if you have existing franchisees in China, you have to then, sort of, disclose those as well. Next slide, please. Again, there's this cooling off period concept, right? Again, this is some I think, largely copied from the US and Canadian model. The law itself doesn't really say that the cooling off period has to be X date, right? But I think that in terms of market practice, we've seen sort of rather short cooling off periods, as little as 7 days. But again, we've also seen longer cooling off periods as long as like 30 days. So the idea is that just because the franchisee has signed the agreement, they actually can have a statutory cooling off period in which they can back out of the agreement without penalty, right? Again, I think that the framework to look at this is how that the government's trying to protect kind of these commercial actors in a weaker position, right? They don't own the brand. They might be interacting with a large brand, a large franchisor. They're really not in the right. Don't necessarily have the leverage to negotiate. So again, this is really meant to sort of protect their interests so that they can have a kind of a back out kind of period. There's also this initial term requirement of 3 years, but it can be waived and sort of consented to by the franchisee. Next slide, please. Okay. So again, these are some of the documents that you would have to provide to register your franchise with the government, through the government system, the sort of Ministry of Commerce system. Again, I already talked about sort of the 2+1 rule, right? And then again, you also have to demonstrate that you actually have kind of brand ownership that you're able to license into China. You would have to disclose your sort of operation manual. I guess one thing kind of to keep in mind is that if you're doing this on a cross-border basis, again, these documents themselves seem relatively kind of simple, right? It's not. I think if you were just looking at it afresh, you probably wouldn't say, oh, this seems super strange or super stringent that I would be required to provide these things. But I think, you do have to jump through a few more hoops, right? So you have this power of attorney. They actually make you take that power of attorney, right? Get it notarized, maybe get it apostilled by sort of the local government. And then further, you have to get it consularized by your local, PRC consulate. So just to go through that process, that could take you 2 months, right? If we just look at this power of attorney requirement, it seems so simple. But then in terms of how it's implemented, you've just lost 2 months in terms of your ability to actually present the document to the Chinese government to register your, franchise. Next slide, please. So the recordo is with the Ministry of Commerce, right? And the requirement is to record within 15 days of execution with the first franchise agreement. Right, then you have to update the system within 30 days of occurrence of certain material changes, business resources, distribution of stores of all franchisees in China. And then there's also an annual update, right? So again, this system is largely similar to kind of some of the more regulation-heavy systems in the US and in Canada, where you have to make annual disclosures and annual filing. So it's not just a one-time initial, front-end filing for your franchise. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think in terms of the offshore and onshore model, I've talked a little bit about it already, but clearly, right, it takes much longer to register an offshore franchise. Sometimes it's taking companies, more than 2 years to sort of register. And a lot of times, essentially, your franchisees are up and running, right? The store is fully fitted out, they're in business operation, but yet this, franchise registration is still, still pending. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah. So comparatively, if you do it on an onshore basis, so if you've had the financial wherewithal to come into China already, you've set up a couple of self-operated stores, right? You have a central kitchen, or you have centralized management. Then you sort of franchise locally. You can tell, right? It only takes you about a month to sort of register your sort of franchise through an onshore recorder. So the timing difference here is very, very sort of significant. Next slide, please. So again, I won't sort of read this sort of one by one, but this is just to sort of give you a sense of sort of the online sort of account with MOFCOM. And this is the type of information that you would have to provide. Next slide, please. Yeah, again, this is our experience that, when we handle some of these sort of franchise registrations for sort of larger clients and sort of larger brand owners, it's, that MOFCOM still has a relatively small team of people handling sort of franchise registrations. And it's just it's very hard to get them on the phone to speak to them about your particular file or your sort of particular, case. So again, I think the system itself, in terms of franchise registration, at least in our view, certainly with respect to sort of foreign franchisors, is not kind of super friendly. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just to give you a sense of sort of what the application process is for onshore, onshore franchisors. Next slide, please. Yeah. So before I end, I do want to talk a little bit about kind of, sort of other sort of business structures or sort of models for sort of, franchising sort of in China. If you look at the rules themselves, you probably come away with an impression to say, gee, this seems like kind of a difficult process, right? I mean, if it takes you 2 years to register a franchise, who would ever bother, right? Why, how could you ever enter the market? So I'll sort of maybe just spend the next few minutes talk a little bit about sort of, okay, what are the models that people have used to enter the Chinese market in the interim, right? I mean, I think I already alluded to one earlier, which is, well, I mean, if you have the financial resources, one way to kind of short circuit this process is that you just come in and set up a couple of directly operated stores. You run that, and assuming that that's financially viable and you are meeting some level of success, then you would go through an onshore franchise registration model, which is much, much quicker, right? I mean, we're talking a month versus 24 months. I mean, it's a huge disparity in timing. I think another model that people have used is that, again, if you just look at the data in terms of franchise registrations in the MOFCOM system, yes, it seems like it's already a lot there, right? Thousands and thousands and thousands of registrations. But I think what's more interesting in China is that actually a lot of the franchises are just simply not registered, right, through the system. Okay, and I think my partner Isabella will spend a little bit of time to talk through some of the IP issues. So one classic sort of way people sort of start their franchises and kind of worry about their franchise registrations a little bit later is that they actually just extend sort of brand operation licenses into kind of their Chinese licensees and franchisees. Again, sort of China is still a little bit more kind of form over substance of a jurisdiction, right? So you call it a cat rather than a dog, and people can still manage to operate, right? So you can extend a trademark license, you can extend a brand license of some sort, and essentially you can extend all of your brand operation manuals, all of your sort of requirements. And the key is really, okay, can the franchisee make money and then essentially pay you a fee that could be called a trademark license fee rather than a sort of franchise fee. So that's kind of one very popular way where a lot of people have sort of made forays into this market without kind of jumping through the rather sort of regulation heavy hurdles of this sort of franchise registration regime. I think another model that people have used, again, to try to get out of this sort of rather restrictive box of sort of PRC franchising regulations is actually to find a franchisee that actually has some financial resources. So a very popular way 20, 15 years ago that a lot of them found themselves a large and financially capable Hong Kong trading company, right? Trading Hong. You extend a master franchise to them, right? For Asia Pacific, for China, for Shanghai, for Beijing, right? I mean, even Starbucks, enter the market in that kind of fashion. And then you essentially have a franchise agreement that's, technically outside of the realm of sort of PRC franchising regulations, right? It's a Hong Kong law governed franchise agreement. It's a Singapore law, a governed master franchise agreement. Your franchisee presumably has financial resources. They can start paying you kind of the various bullets that they have to pay you under the franchise agreement. Then they step into China. What do? Well, they set up self-operated stores, right? Once they set up self-operated stores through a Hong Kong co or a Singapore co, again, technically speaking, they're outside of the rules of these franchising regulations because they're not franchising to themselves, right? They're just a licensee, and they are directly operating their shops and their stores in China. I mean, I think this model is still relatively popular, but I think the drawback clearly is that it's not so easy to find, sort of financially capable, master franchisees or licensees, right? You need to find people that actually have access to, at a minimum, right, for foreign exchange offshore that they can start paying you these various sort of store setup costs, these, the design and marketing costs and those sort of things. But that's certainly another model where a lot of players have entered the market without kind of initially bothering, right, with these kind of rules. But I think, I think the conclusion I would say is that, again, I think compliance with these sort of franchising registration rules is sort of on the rise. But I think how a lot of people sort of eventually come to comply, but sort of their journey to compliance actually can be quite different, right? Either through self-operations, the local franchising, or through a master franchise to an offshore company, then that sets up kind of local sort of direct operations. So that's the end of my piece of the presentation. Thank you, everyone.
So I will take over from Howard now. Hi, everyone. I'm Isabella. So I'm going to talk about IP protection in China. I think flowing from what Howard was just commenting, right, in terms of different options as to, entry, introduction of your franchising operation to China, there are different ways to approach this. And I think if you adopt, the really licensing model, brand licensing, IP licensing model, it really underscores the importance of, setting up a proper IP portfolio in China to be ready for that entry, regardless of your choice of model of entry. I think coming back to what Howard was explaining, right, as to the definition of commercial franchising. Can I have the next slide, please? Just to reiterate here, right, it's really about licensing another party the right to use your operational resources. Now, operational resources under the regulations actually specifically refer to the various IP rights that we've listed here. So it can be trademarks, patents, and copyrights. And all these three types of IP are registrable in China. Unlike, for example, in Hong Kong, there's no copyright registration. You actually can register copyright in China, even though China is part of the Berne Convention, and therefore it doesn't require registration for copyright to exist, but it is a very good way to evidence your rights in copyrightable materials, such as menus, such as your logos, and sometimes even in terms of design of your shop front. And then, of course, there's also the trade secrets and know-how. Trade secrets, by definition, under PRC law, does include business secrets, and therefore your suppliers list, your customers list, all can be included if the criteria of enforceable trade secrets can be met. So I think generally, just to say, right, the overall principles is to approaching franchising and that sort of licensing model sort of generally aligned with what you may be familiar with. But given that IP system is really jurisdictional, what is important is to really pay attention to the specifics of IP law in China. And also, I think appreciating, I will flag here that China is a civil law system, and therefore the framework as to enforcement and even civil litigation can be very different from the common law structure. So I think these are really the specifics to draw out in preparation for China entry. Can I have next slide, please? So just talking about, I mentioned there are different publicly available resources, right? So trademark is one of them. We mean by, everyone can see that, and there's a trademark register maintained by the trademark office in China. So really going back, right, to earlier speaker's point, right, for trademarks in China is a first to file system. So you really should be filing early, and because PRC register is very crowded, I think it has more records than the USPTO at the moment. So filing and clearance preparation early is very important. We also want to draw out that actually, the classification system in China, in addition to the international NIST classification of 45 classes, actually each international class is broken down into subclasses. And within the subclasses, yes, goods and services are similar, but outside of the subclass, right, they can be regarded as dissimilar. So this is really quite specific and jurisdictional classification system. And a lot of times without paying attention, maybe right, the coverage you secure in other jurisdictions may not be, the approach might not be sufficient for China. And we will also say that, China doesn't require use in registering. So actually in practice, a lot of the businesses do go in and cover as many classes as possible, not only for your short-term usage. For example, if you have a restaurant business to franchise, not only you will cover the core class, right, 43 for restaurant services, other things that you will see in the store, for example, your cutleries and your napkins under class 16, your tablewares and your table napkins of textiles and the various different types of food and beverage. Those things that can bear your trademarks should also all be registered. There can even be merchandises, right? The restaurant may be carrying going forward, and these should also be considered as well. There are risks for not doing so. I mentioned earlier that the China registry is very crowded. So not having a registered trademark right does mean that you create exposure to infringement of third-party marks already on the register in China. There are real cases for this. There was an earlier case where actually where franchisor directed use of an unregistered trademark to a franchisee. The franchisee was actually pursued for trademark infringement claims. And ultimately, the franchisor was held by the court to be responsible for the infringement loss suffered by the franchisee. So it's really important across different sectors for the branding to be properly secured through a sufficient trademark portfolio. And another point to really flag is Chinese trademarks. A lot of the foreign language marks coming to China may not be easily recognizable or cannot be pronounced properly by Chinese consumers. In those cases, right, where the franchisor, licensor hasn't actually developed the Chinese mark, in our experience, you can expect a local mark or local language mark will be developed by the consumers for easier recognition. That can really create issues for the licensor, franchisor. And there are many, many examples where Chinese marks actually have been pirated by third parties in China. It takes a lot of efforts to either recover or to rebrand. Next slide, please. Patents. I will be quite brief here, just to say that I think traditionally people, you heard from Howard and earlier speakers, right? Traditionally in China, recorded franchises generally in the F&B sort of sector. So, you think about the IP that's relevant to that sector, probably less, right, on the patent side. I think things are changing. Just want to say one, in China, patents actually covers 3 different types. You have the design patents, utility model patents, invention patents. So in terms of designs, it is worth considering before you actually introduce or use elsewhere to actually have that registered. Because what we know also is, third-party pirates and sometimes authorized licensees or franchisees may actually go beyond their authorization and try to register IP. And design patents, example, in China doesn't require substantive examination and can actually be secured relatively quickly within 9 months from filing. So, this is the type of patent that shouldn't be overlooked when you look at China IP portfolio planning. I would also say that, I heard one of the differentiators for successful franchisees from our earlier speaker is digitalization. That's indeed the case, right? So if you're thinking about the F&B industry, companies are developing the booking, the underlying sort of IT system for easier logistics. The same with hotels. So when you're thinking about sort of software-related inventions that build into a system for IT in support of the business, consideration can also be given to securing any patentable inventions in that setting. We mentioned here quite quickly, just infringement risks. It's very important to consider, again, third-party rights in China. I mentioned designs, right? So other people may have actually secured some of design rights. Utility model, for example, if you have, a very interesting refrigerating system, or that can actually be protected. So third parties may already have secured that right. So it's important to have a look at it. If I can have the next slide. Thank you. So also related to that, I mentioned about suppliers list, customers list already. But for example, if you have a particular algorithm for protecting orders online booking system, for example, that can be protected as trade secret in addition to copyright. So the point is really looking across your operation system, right? And then really do a full sort of IP audit to secure as much as possible the registrable rights in China for ease of enforceability. When it comes down to trade secrets and know-how, really it's all about contractual and IT and operational protection. Just want to flag, right, within the franchisee system, you really, these are all third parties. You do have the contractual safeguards that you can rely on. So leverage that and making sure that, all the provisions are very clear, right? The scope of right that's provided and, providing different layers of access rights for different categories of information. Having very clear contractual provisions not only help you to enforce contractual rights, but the actual contract itself can be useful evidence as to intended scope of rights, so that where you have the option to pursue infringement actions, you can use also the contract as evidence as to the scope of rights provided to the licensed or unauthorized parties. Just also to say, I mentioned that for civil litigation framework in China, because the civil litigation system really places onus on the plaintiff in supporting his claim. So, it's really important to have very clear confidentiality provisions. You have signing by the right parties, additional notices on confidential information, for example, and also to implement operational and IT system to monitor and audit, so that you can prevent, to the extent possible, any inadvertent use and disclosure of confidential information as well. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm sort of conscious of time, just want to say that, we've prepared a number of cases to show you actually things have gone wrong. And when things go wrong, actually, courts do support and protect franchisors' IP through different options. For example, for breach of trademark rights, IP rights, or can be trade secrets, for example, under the anti-unfair competition law that can be protected. It goes beyond the trademark infringement. So where a third party or even your authorized franchisee out of scope, whether start selling products that infringes rights, or it conducts business outside of the scope of authorized activities, that can be remedied through either unfair competition law or trademark infringement actions, in addition to contractual breach remedies. There can also be, termination, post-termination, continued use, beyond term of termination, it's actually quite a common issue. So maybe we will go to the next slide to just give you a more specific example. So the first one, there's a Chinese clothing company actually granted rights to an individual franchisee to sell the franchisor's clothing. And the franchisor noticed through its audit using of identifier, the barcodes of its products, that the franchisee is actually using the franchised mark, licensed trademark, but actually not selling the franchisor's product. Or it could be using, not using the product barcode, but using the franchisor's trademark. So the plaintiff realized that there is discrepancy in terms of the product supplied, and actually filed a court action. With the court supervision, then franchisor was able to do a proper audit, looking at the clothing amongst the products at the store, and noted that the amount of clothing did not actually match the amount of clothing supplied to the franchisee. Next slide, please. So in this case, the court actually held that trademarks, of course, very important, being the core franchise operational resource, and the unified image and goodwill of the franchise is largely dependent on the customer's connection and appreciation of this badge of recognition. And when franchisor license is trademark, the franchisor has every right to control how actually the franchisee uses the trademark. And it noted that any use of the trademark without the permission of the franchisor is a breach of contract or infringement. So under the PRC law, actually in this situation, the franchisor has the option to either pursue breach of contract claim or infringement claim. In this case, the franchisor actually opted for breach of contract, and the franchisee was ordered to pay a fixed amount as compensation for the loss suffered by the franchisor. Next slide, please. Here, just to illustrate, right, when the scope of the conduct of business goes beyond what is actually authorized. Here, there's a company selling maternity and baby products. Again, an individual franchisee. In this franchise agreement, actually, the franchisee is authorized to open a particular store with a designated address. So it's very particular to the locality of the store to be opened. The franchisee then signed a separate agreement with a third party. The third party helped to actually provide the services to set up a WeChat. So as most of you probably know, WeChat is a very popular, commonly used platform for e-commerce and social networking. So on this platform, WeChat, it also has a mini program for product offering. So this third party actually designed and set up the online store for the franchisee. And for this particular online store, the mini program actually used the franchisor's trade name as part of the store name, as noted here. And then the franchisee sold the franchisor's goods with through the mini program. Next slide, please. So there are two issues really. What the court found that actually there's no trademark infringement, because the franchisee was actually still offering the franchisor's goods. So I think the notion is really similar to parallel import. It is, the franchisor already profit once for the supply of the products. So it's not suffered because there's no confusion as to origin of the goods. However, there is unfair competition because by offering the online store mini program without the authorization of the franchisee actually, is taking a portion of the franchisor's market. So the point here really is to say in practice, and because of digitalization, it's very impractical to consider, online, offline, different channels to be authorized. So online channel or e-commerce channel should be considered as part of the resources when we think about territory and permitted scope. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think I would just say that actually for this one, it's pretty straightforward. Post termination, the franchisee continues to use the franchisor's trademark on the signboard. It was also continuing to use the trade name, a company name, incorporating the franchised trademark post termination, despite the contractual obligation to change the trade name, the company name. Next slide, please. So the court actually looked at two different aspects, right? The use of the name on the signboard and also in terms of the business name. So it found that there's enforceable rights with respect to both. So from this case, really want to highlight, right? It is not recommended that you allow a franchisee to use the trademark, the licensed trademark within the company name, because post termination is quite difficult to get the name to be changed. Court did support the remedy, but as you can see, the compensation is not too significant. So contractual prohibition should be actually clearly laid out. So I'm conscious of time. For the last case, we'll just to say, next slide, is just to say that it is possible to impose confidentiality obligations on franchisees and enforce those rights. So perhaps we go to the last slide. So just to share that, there are some tips for protecting IP. I think most of them are really sort of quite straightforward in terms of principle. You'll have very clear contractual provisions for laying out for the reasons that I mentioned before. So you can review this, the slides will be shared. I would say that really going back to my earliest point about IP infringement, really is about looking at a China-specific IP framework specifically and doing audit. And you attend to clearance early and you attend to register available IP rights early in China so that you have the right portfolio to support your intended business operations. Because doing so will also protect you and the franchisees from IP infringement claims. And also allow you to pursue unauthorized users, which enhances really your position with your franchisees and really protect the integrity and the goodwill of your IP in the Chinese market. Thank you very much.
So again, hopefully the very nice bento lunch will not make us sleepy. Yeah? I'm told not to crack jokes, so we have to fall asleep. Okay, first and foremost, I want to introduce the various panelists. I'm a bit biased. I'll start with the guy first. Sorry, ladies. Okay, this very handsome man, Mr. Gan Shiwen, is the VP Group Sales and Marketing and the COO of Commune Lifestyle. Okay, I allocate exactly 1 minute for each speaker, so it's very fair. So Shiwen has been with this group for 15 years, starting with the parent company Koda 5 years and 10 over years at Commune. Yeah. So he's basically the guy that deals with all the dealers all over the world, yeah, other than doing sales and marketing. Yeah. And of course, if you read his bio, he has received a lot of awards. So who knows, maybe PAB will invite him for a tea session. Yeah? Okay. Okay, next we have this, I call her, Nisha, meaning she is like a
Fu master, but feminine one in China. Her name is Serene Ang. She's the co-founder of Snack Kit. Long story short, 2002, she started selling Vietnamese and Thai fusion food in a kiosk in Plaza Singapura. And then later in 2010, very boldly, she ventured into China. Okay. At the peak, she got 7 outlets. And then I'll let her tell the juicy story. Then she has also gone into a partnership with the Japanese noodle brand. And then she might want to bring it to China. I think the name of it is called Menya Coco, right? So very interesting. You can, if you talk to her, you can feel her energy. You know, wow, fantastic. Then next to me is Nancy Soon. Nancy, in 1985, became the master franchisee of Helen O. Reddy Drama Academy for the whole of East Asia, very big. Yeah. Then again, very boldly, she piloted one location in 2006. Very clever because she tests the waters first. Then once she's more confident, she appointed an area developer in 2010. At her peak, she got 25 centers, you know, in China. So also all of them will be speaking from experience and not what we call some tanping, talk theory, but no better scars for sure. Yeah. So with that, I will. Where is the clicker? Okay, I will just show you what are the things we will. Okay. No battery. Yeah. No, go back. Go back. Should be okay now? Yeah. Okay, good. So these are the 3 very simple but very important discussion points, right? So number 1, what do you do right or wrong in China? So we start with Shivan, and then Serene, and then Nancy.
Okay. Happy to
mask, show them your handsome face.
Hi everyone. Yeah, happy to be here. Honored to be invited on the panelists. So to talk about what Albert's question is, right or wrong, very subjective, very difficult to say. Because just now when Howard was presenting, right, wow, I start to get worried. Wow, the franchise law are so you know strict and talking about registering and all. Then I come to I didn't register at all. No. So I got worried. But then he ended off his presentation by saying that there are 2 other unorthodox ways to get by it. Then I said, oh, hey, still safe. So there's no right or wrong. I believe doing business in China, because it's a journey that all of us learn to challenge ourselves and to learn about the market, I would say. But very importantly is the right partner that you engage with. And in China, is actually, I would say that it's a haven for businessmen, because with the right amount of convincing, anything can be done. Yes and no, but the thing is, you cannot have a how should I say, have a Singaporean's mentality there that you have to queue up, you take number means the number will go in sequence, this kind. So a bit of localization, and nothing is wrong. It's just learning from mistakes, picking up from where you left. And I would say that I think both of them agree with me that China is a big pie that we cannot overlook. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Serene?
Yeah, okay. Nice to be here as well. He beautified my resume too much. I went in better and just share a bit of my experience. Yeah, so 2010, when I went into China, right, went in really fast, because it's a place where I thought I could make a lot of money fast. And indeed, there were a lot of opportunities there. So I plunged into it. There were a lot of misconceptions then. Okay, one of it was labor is cheap. Second is they are very backward. So in a way, we are way ahead of them. So a lot of opportunities. Thirdly, it's we have money. So setting up things is very easy there. Okay. So we went in, we did everything wrong, nothing right at first. Yeah. So that was where we paid quite a big school fees. I think we didn't have an in-depth knowledge. In particularly, I think we didn't understand the consumer market there. We didn't understand the laws, the taxation, which later on we realized could save us quite a bit of money. And then also we brought an all Singaporean and PR team, Singapore PR team there, which was actually bad for us because they took a while to immerse into the culture, and in the end we lost out on a lot of things. And lastly, I think we didn't customize, we didn't localize, we copy and paste the so-called winning formula in Singapore. We thought if it works here, it can work anywhere, right? And there we were wrong. So that is all, in fact, we did everything wrong, really everything. So I think we'll cover the second part of it later. Yeah, we'll improve on it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so first of all, I am in the education industry, and one of the things was when I first ventured into China was at the invitation of Beijing, what we call the Normal University, Beida. And when you get an invitation in from one of the schools, that is already the start of what you heard this morning about the Guanxi, and that does help. But more importantly, I think it was because they needed something I have that helped made it right in my first entry, which was they knew I had what we call the Huangjia Pingpai, because drama, Shakespeare from overseas, right, from UK. And so that helped my initial foray into China, even as a foreign brand. And as Albert has shared, I decided not to, go into starting up my own, and decided let's just do what we call a pilot run. Let's just utilize a small venue to be locations. And so we work with international schools, local schools, and yes, I did bring a Singapore instructor in, based there, and it helped because, again, they want the English speakers to be as authentic as possible. And so I felt what I did right was really, the opportunity was there, the chance was there. I went in with that. But at the same time as what I think we've heard this morning, the IP part of it from then till now is something that I would definitely stress to get your trademarks put in place. So that was something that I did, even though I was starting with that small one center. I started the ball rolling since then and had it refreshed when I changed logos and so forth to actually meet with the times. So I think that was definitely one of the first, what we call, opportunity to help me move fast from there.
I thought I would just add a little bit to what Shiren said about no right or wrong. I was during lunchtime just sharing with Andy and another person said that Laura mentioned about understanding the culture, it being 3,000 plus, 5,000 plus kind of thing. I think a lot of us know that most Chinese read several important books, the 西游记, 水浒传, 红楼梦. Then if you were to take a step back and think about what these three classics are about, actually, there's no right or wrong. All of them are heroes. Is Cao Cao a bad guy? Who says so? Is Liu Bei a bad guy? So the monkey got fight with this guy, that guy, but it's all about bravery and being smart. So if you take a step back and see it from that perspective, then you will see why the Chinese are so flexible. They 随机应变 and then they are so gutsy. You know, of course, the socialism and what you play a part. But I think if you have time, you know, go to the National Library. There's some condensed version, and there are the English versions. You know, and it's quite surprising. You know, that if you take a step back and say, hey, you know, actually quite interesting that the Chinese maybe think like that. That's why you think it's wrong, but then no, I handle it quite well. You know, I know how to be flexible. Whereas you Singaporeans are like only one way. You know, yeah. Okay, so with that we go to question 2. How do you overcome whatever key challenges, right? So again, we start with Shivan.
Key challenges, definitely when you step into this Chinese market, the challenges come hit you in the face, straight in your face. Even though we all speak Chinese, 讲华语, they take it very differently. The way they receive messages very different. Our Instagram, lesser word better, but their WeChat posts, write essay one, they like to read. None of us can write like that. So we need to localize a lot of content. We even use their own people to manage their own people. So when we do a dealership program, I have a China team to actually manage the dealers. Why I say dealers, I am also like everyone here. I take a franchise menu and go to China and happily sell the franchise. But it doesn't work. So what I did was we localized a lot. We threw a franchise fee and royalty out of the window and say, no need. So I overcome a lot of franchise law, of registration, this and that. But it's not what I intend to do, and it's not because I'm smart, I know how to do that. It's because they work that way. All the furniture dealership works that way. So you got to localize to suit their way of business. And very fundamental things like, the terms of the contract must be 3 years and above and all. But in China, furniture industry, the term 1 year only. Why 1 year? Because the mall lease them the shop 1 year. 1年1千. So very, very weird, right? We cannot take it. Wow, 1年, how you make money? If you don't make money, you're out. You're finished, you're done. But that is their game. And they love their game. Because 1 year to them is they don't make it, they change brand now. Is as quick as that. So risk to us, we will find that so fast, it's not sustainable. We want to build long-term dealership and all this. So these are challenges that we may not understand in the first place. And later on it comes, then you experience it. And overcoming this, sometimes you just cannot get your mind over. So you use the locals to manage the local. That will be one of the best solution to that, because they really can have their own lingo and they know how it works. They know how the furniture mall works, above and under, So we don't know all this. So you use them to manage. So this is easier for us to, control all the dealers that we have. Initially, we were doing it directly. We have 20 dealers, 30 dealers. Everybody's like friend, family, like this room, like that, very happy. But when it comes to now 87 stores with 60 over dealers, it's kind of difficult. So you got to put things in systemize everything, and using their language, their system to manage them. That's how you can get past, not get past, but find areas to go about certain things.
I was looking at them. I was like looking at it and say, hey, you have a success story. I'm sharing my failure stories. Because at my peak, I had 7 outlets. Now I'm left with 3, 2 not open because of the lockdown. And 1 is franchised. So in a way, sharing the bad things so you don't do it again. If I have a chance, I probably want to do everything right from the very beginning. How did I overcome the challenges? One of it is spending more time there. You really have to know the market yourself, not through someone who told you China is this, China is that. And Shanghai is different from Beijing. Beijing is different from Guangzhou and Wuhan, and all sorts. And there's a different culture in different places and cities. So for you to actually go into one city, you got to do your homework. So I think what we did right hire the right people to guide us. We got the right legal help. We went to the professionals to actually guide us. That's important. Second, I think we localized, like what Shivan has said. We embrace a lot. We change a lot of our mindset because we realize things that sell here really does not necessarily will sell there. So we actually customize to the local taste. And surprisingly in Shanghai, people who likes our food, sweet in Shanghai, when I went to Chengdu, they like it in a different way. So again, I got to redo all the customizations. It's a lot of work. That's important though. Be very adaptable to these changes. Stop thinking, I'm going to bring it in. I'm sure it'll work. My team is good. No problem. It's not going to work. Second is, of course, hire locals. This is very important. You need some locals. They have the home ground advantage. They have the local knowledge. They know the taxation better. They know how to do things at a cheaper cost and faster and efficient. I apply a permit, right? In Singapore, maybe they say 3 to 5 work days and I get it within 3 work days. I can even complain if I don't get it. But then in China, because I'm also a 100% foreign-owned entity, right? So it can stretch up to 7 weeks just because you are rigid, just because you go by the books. But if you get a local to do the same procedures, right, you'll be surprised. They get it done within 7 days. Of course, 2 cigarettes, a transport card, and so on and so forth. So have to be adaptable. Stop having this rigid mindset that this is the right way to do it. We should only do it that way. I think that is important. That's how we change it. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my story sounds like it started off so good and it will end with all typical fairy tales, with a happily ever after. But now we know that this 2 years has cost us everything that we have started off well with. So both Shivan and Serene have shared with you, the 2 key things that is localization. And that even in the education industry, we have to learn to deal with that. When I first went in, typical mentality, I'm from the Western world, Singapore culture, bilingual, effectively. Therefore, I can talk and give talks to parents and everybody. But at the end of the day, in drama, we don't have books. Or rather, the teachers have, but not the students. Because you're supposed to put up a performance. But when you're in China, 没书的. It's like, no books, and you call this education? Something is very wrong. So the mindset was something I had to wrap my head around, was trying to convince everybody to just send your kids. Yes, we don't have books. So it took me about 4 years. So the build-up was slow because I was not ready to adapt. But finally, when I did, the momentum was very high. And by the time, of course, I wasn't in Asia. I was actually 7 years in the US, running both the operations here and building up the US at the same time. So the thing is, listen to what the locals who are trying to help open the market tells you, because they want to be successful. And we can only be successful if they are successful. So my job is actually not to think so much of the dollars and cents behind the franchise and the royalty and everything else, but how to make you look good first. And knowing that I've developed a good relationship with you, you will start to make things happen for me. So that was what I did when I appointed area developer and gradually helped him to succeed, opening more centers in Beijing and work closely with more institutions like Peking University, Beida, Beishida, and Beishida Yatai. And gradually all these deans or principals started to come on board and help with that branding, grow it very quickly. So one of the things I would say is the flexibility, the adaptability, and learn to listen. That means I would also learn to filter, because they tell you who I know, or my guanxi. But really, when it comes down to doing, oh, you only know somebody here, not somebody right on top. And so the results are different. So question, ask, and really you know, do more listening rather than talking. I think that's one of the key things over these last years that I would definitely say is important. Definitely trademark. Yeah, I would say endlessly. Even when I publish the books, I trademark it because I put a different logo and so forth. So a lot of different things, but when you do it, just make sure that that's right at the front before you embark on anything, because the minute they know my website, China will be so creative and they say, oh, this website in China, is it yours? And then you get spammed many times because they will try to trademark every single possible version of HelenO'Grady.cn.info.biz. everything, because you did not block it. All right, so work with your lawyers and they'll be the best person to advise.
I will share my experience. I had a master franchisee in Beijing. At that time, I haven't changed my company name to Asia Wide Franchise Consultants. At that time, it was called Franchise Development Services. Robin here in the room will know. Yeah, I was then operating as a master franchisee of a franchise consulting firm based in Norwich, England. So anyway, to cut the story short, so I was expanding this brand called Franchise Development Services. So my franchisee in China, again, you know, the culture of face and this. So franchising was very new then, and this guy is a good talker. Okay, he's a Mr. Liu, and he's very smart. So after training him and his team to be consultants in China, he grabbed all the big projects, including Xiao Tian'e and whatever. But unfortunately, he is 要出风头, you know, he wants to. So he branded himself as the 中国特许第一人. That offended the China Franchise Association. You know, Guo Keping then was the chair lady. She said, 谁封给你的这个第一人? You know, so there were some disagreements, and so as a Singaporean, I quite kiasu, so I didn't want to offend the government, because at that time the association was under the 内贸部, domestic trade, which doesn't exist anymore. So I say, 官字两个口啊，高官就四个口啊， right? 一品四官就很多口了。So anyway, I didn't want to offend her, so I actually terminated this Mr. Liu in as friendly a basis as I could. But very strangely, he continued to use my logo in a lot of shows. So I said, how to fight him? You know, then I spoke to many lawyers. I said, it will be a long process and it is very hard that you can win the case. So I had to think out of the box. Finally, I spoke to Guo Keping, the lady that runs the association. She said, very simple. I won't allow him to participate in any shows. You know, and I will, you know, directly or indirectly tell our members that the real guy is still you, don't worry. So he got the message. He wasn't allowed to go to the shows and all. So finally he gave up. So what I'm trying to tell you is, sometimes you have to use indirect ways. You know, you don't want to, you know, pretend yourself as an egg and then go and fight a stone, because he's well connected, you know, except that he couldn't fight the chair lady, you know. Yeah. So till today, he still teaches franchising in Beijing Sifan Daxie, Zhuhai. It doesn't mean this person didn't do well here, he will not do well in other parts of China. No. They are very smart. They still know where to go and still survive. So okay, now we go to the last question. Key success factors to grow the brand in China. Shivan, you again.
A lot of dinners and drinking. No, jokes aside, I think we have spoken a lot saying that we need to localize, we need to understand them and things like that. And that is very true. Very good example is that for us Singaporeans, right, you sign the contract means that's it, right? For them, they sign the contract means later still can talk on. So you need to know the difference. So they are like that, and we need to understand what they want, localize. However, that being said, localization also there is a certain degree that you can do that. So you need to understand your own business. For us, I think the key success factor in terms of design and concept is that we really stand firm in our design and we believe in what we do. When we went in 2012, our renovation was black, cement floor, open ceiling, commune without Chinese name. It was totally rejected, you know, being, you know, black is being not auspicious. And then how can you come to China without a Chinese name and things like that? The 10 years, I think now 9-10 years down the road, we are still like that. So you got to believe in what you do. And sometimes they don't know what they want until they see it. And they are very influenced by a lot of Italian and American designs. So the degree of localization, you really need to consider what makes them tick. You may be too fast ahead, but you need to take the risk. Put your foot down and say, no, this is going to be, I'm not going to give a Chinese name to commune. That's it. You want, you take it. You don't want, just, you know, go and find somebody else. That's one. Second is, I believe the Singapore brands hold a lot of water in China. And when you say that you come from Singapore, and of course, talking about IP and all, they can copy everything, but they cannot copy your DNA. You're from Singapore means you are from Singapore. They cannot copy that. And this, thankfully, is our founding father, Lee Kuan Yew. He has made the name for us. But now, after the 2 years, a lot of political issues. My Singapore 品牌 become 国际品牌. I remove the Singapore, very scared. Anything they drop you like South Korea, then we'll be in trouble. Okay, I think the most important success factor that I would say is transparency. We are very transparent to our partners and our dealers. Transparent in the way of how we do business, how we actually track their KPIs. If they hit it, don't hit it, we give them scoring, and we don't show favoritism. Because in China, you know, they will pay under table money just to get goods, because they are, you know, account manager favorite you than the rest. So transparency is what they appreciate a lot. Because in the furniture industry in China, a lot of this kind of money flowing around to get the brand or to get the goods or to get space in furniture mall or this and that. So we actually are very transparent. You want us to help, we help. We don't take extra money. You want goods, you pay whatever that is listed on the price list. That's it. I can even tell you how much I sell you, how much you make. I can even tell you the landed cost and how much I make. I am not, you know, it's not a secret. So transparency is something that they appreciate a lot. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
To add on, of course, to be able to speak and read Chinese is important, I would say. If you don't at least bring along someone who can, I think not knowing the language, the culture, definitely it's you minus some points of your success. Yeah. And we keep mentioning localization. Surprisingly, it's my driver who was the first one to tell me, 洪总要接地气. It's like I go supermarket, I buy the most expensive eggs because I think cheap means no good, because either fake or no, I get all sorts of. So it's always my driver who told me 接地气, 本土化. So all these are important things. So, but the degree to how you localize, how much you localize, of course, depends on your brand, your product. Like Shivan, for example, stayed first to whatever he stands for. I mean, that's important as well. And social media savviness is getting to be more and more important. And I didn't have that when I went in. 小红书啦, this TikTok啦, Weibo啦, the number of followers on these platforms are no joke. You need to be heard in order to be successful. And for that, it's good if you go in with that plan in mind, a good marketing plan, a social media plan, you know, so you get higher levels of success. And no joke, this drinking part really helped me quite a bit. It's not a joke. I mean, eating liver supplements since 2010 because of that. Yeah, but seriously, 关系 is important. So to maintain relationships, sometimes you do have to do some degree of entertainment. knowing the right people, the right people, I mean vendors, authorities, bankers, all these are important people you should, do a bit of networking with once in a while. But at the end of the day, I think get your knowledge, at least do some homework, get your knowledge on few things is important. Labor laws, yeah. So I hire quite a bit of Chinese. In China itself, the labor laws does not protect us, being foreign-owned entities, it protect the locals. So sometimes for valid reasons, I can't fire them, I cannot dismiss them. And for that, if you don't know enough, you may get into quite a bit of trouble. So knowing taxation is also important. All this, consumer markets. If you are doing F&B like myself, do know, for the place that you're going in, like Shanghai or going to Beijing, know their consumer behaviors so that you have a higher chance of success. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I first have to ask, who in here is actually looking at going in under education or enrichment at all? You are? Okay. Yeah. So the thing is that today, because of the Shuangjian that was announced, almost every enrichment, what we call education programs in China has been affected. So everybody was joking with me that drama was non-traditional. It's an enrichment, China goes for the tuition and all the cram school. I'm not doing that. So I'm not making the big bucks that's out there. But then the minute the Shuangjian came in, everybody thought, wow, it's your Tiandi. You should be the ones making, right? But nothing could be worse to hear that, because the laws also know that people are going to move, especially those doing English, into that. So, drama, they are doing it in English. All of a sudden, we got hit for the wrong reasons because we are doing it in English. And because of that, yes, all my franchisees are all affected by this Shuangjian tremendously. So earlier you've heard what all three of us espouse, flexibility and adaptability. So for me, I move very quickly, and speed is one of the things that's needed. So to think about how else can education be taught where online is not allowed for certain age bands now, and the older age bands, you have a limit of only 1 hour or 2 maximum for them online. And what the kids want, not for your classes, but they want it for games. So therefore, it will be not a win game for that. But if you convert and you start to think, how else can you work outside the 9 dots of a center and kids and in English? There are lots of opportunity. So China is a huge market. In whichever industry you go into, there will always be all these fences and blinds and so forth that will be up, whether it's half or full. So just look at how else can you do this legally if it meets your values. So your value system is the key driver behind the business. And think long term. Don't go for short, all right? Because all the regulations that are coming out could be hitting for this next 2 years, maybe 3 years, and then they might pivot. So do not react just because the regulations have come out this way, but react based on how else can my current value be adapted or be flexible to engage the parents, in my case, in education, who wants it. And they are my main consumers, right? I need to educate them, and then the children will be coming. But if I try to educate the children, it's not going to work. So in my case, I've got 2 sets of customers. Children must be kept happy, then the parents are willing to pay, but the parents must understand that we are not in the same space as all the others. So there's going to be shivers in the whole industry, but when everybody is shivering, that's the time when we need to collect ourselves and rethink. So always bear these two words, flexibility and adaptability, localization. That will get you far.
Very good. Let me see if the next few slides can sort of agitate some questions from the audience.
Can I help?
She's going to help you. Your second
Okay.
hand.
So Jumbo actually, we invited them to be in the panel, but Jia Liang and Mr. Ang said they have other things on. So basically, their points are not very different from our panelists here. So one is, you know, the market must be ready and receptive to, in Jumbo's case, their seafood cuisine, right? So they say that, for example, Shanghai, people from Shanghai who have visited Singapore before will be more drawn to Jumbo's food versus people from, let's say, Xi'an that haven't been. Okay, so they don't know what is chili crab, pepper crab, and whatever. Then number two, there's no necessity to make big adjustment to the dishes. Otherwise, it may morph into a totally different dish. So the originality is lost. Of course, Jumbo will allow their franchisee to add certain dishes that locals like. For example, some liang chai. Okay. And then finally, they say the franchisee must be very carefully chosen. I think this one all of us agree. Yeah. He or she has to believe in the brand and stick to the SOP religiously. Okay. And he or she must be hands-on and watch the quality of food and customer service. That brings me to one thing that I often say. I say that in China, there are three, but one is 本事. You must have the capability, the know-how, you know, to be a good businessman. Another one is 本钱. You must have capital. You don't just go there and hope to take a lot of money. You have to invest, right? Another one is 本尊. It's like you, like a Buddha there, stay down there and jaga and watch. Because I'm sure you have heard of Singapore companies who have been there, and then their managers go there every 3 months. They want to come home because the wife miss them, or they want to attend parent-teacher meeting, or they miss Singapore food. Then after they spend 1 week or 2 weeks here, they go back. Everything is different already. So this Bentuna is like you need to have someone you trust, someone like, you know, Xi Wen who's down there. Oh, don't play the fool with me. I'm here. You know? Yeah? So that's okay. Next one. I just want to share that, you know, in spite of the so-called sad stories or failure stories you hear, a lot of brands still agree. I think all of us here agree too that China is a market you cannot ignore. Okay, and things will get better. Just like their knowledge 30 years ago about franchising, you know, and then now having the biggest franchise show in the world, right? So a good example just now I mentioned was Luckin, right? Racing, right? Racing closed, now they're back, you know, and now they're starting to move very fast again. So much so that even local brands like, what's the name of one local brand that is now very famous? It's called Manor Coffee. Manor Coffee, even Temasek invested in it. I mean, it's not that Temasek didn't know that GIC invested in Luckin and you know, and lost money, right? So because why? The market is very big. You know? So another example is Domino, Dameile Pizza. So they lost money, 10 亿 in 3 years, right? But they now say that in the next 2 years they want to open 300. You know, so these people is not like they want to burn their money anyhow, but they know that the market is there, right? And then I mentioned about Luckin just now, right? Racing. So okay, so concluding comments. I think all of us know the acronym. Singaporeans love acronym pastel, right? You know, political environment, economic environment, social factors, technology, the environmental thing. You know, pay attention to national policies like Nancy just mentioned about, you know, the Shuangjian, right? So that will affect all those child-related kind of businesses. So you really need to be very agile and just, right? And then pay attention to changing demographics. So this basically tells you about Generation Z, that they are more and more nationalistic. Okay, meaning they love their country, you know. And thanks to their songs, 我爱中国 and whatever, it's really very powerful. Yeah. So there are lots of examples here about how they target Generation Z. These slides are all available for you to read on your own. Right. Even when it comes to sports goods, you know, there's this brand, local brand called Anta, and then I'm sure you know Li Ling, right? You know, so you think that they only buy foreign brands, bought Under Armour, and then other brands, but no, Anta and Li Ning, you know, they support. Yeah. And then this one talks about this. I put up this only 3 days ago. Why do luxury brands misunderstand Generation Z in China? Again, they support local brands. Okay, although they are very young. This is probably my final slide. You all know that Yum China has KFC and Pizza Hut, right? Yum China. They also have Xiao Fei Yang, right? In fact, we brought Xiao Fei Yang to Singapore. But they also, a lot of people don't know they have one Chinese fast food brand called Dongfang Jibai. So when I first met the young people, I told them very boldly, I said, 为什么你们的名字叫东方既白？ No, 很诗情画意的。不过在南方跟在台湾啊，其实听起来很粗俗。I said, if you watch K-drama, even the gangsters use the last 2 words to scold people. So they said, really? Then very strangely, the next thing I know, they actually say they, you know, last time they wanted it to be what 最受欢迎的中式快餐. That was their vision. Now they announced that they'll close all the outlets. So even a local brand by a big American player like Yum China can make mistakes, okay? Because they realize that they can't fight the likes of, you know, Zhonggong, Zhengong Fu and many other Chinese fast food brands. Yeah? So I think Yum China, they are still strong in the Western kind of cuisine, you know. But for them to go into Chinese fast food, somehow the thinking is still a little bit wrong. Just one more example before I you know, and then I ask for final comments. You know Subway, right? Subway in China and in Singapore used to call what? 赛百味, 比赛百个味道, which is very good. So same thing, I was joking with David Leong from Subway here. I said, hey, Subway in Taiwan, I realized many years ago they changed the brand to Qian Ting Bao. Qian Ting is you know, submarine, right? Bao is Han Bao. Because sai jiba li do. So to the Taiwanese, 不管你1000个味道, as long as it's sai, I don't want. So sometimes even translation, the regional thing can play a part. So you need to be very careful. You know? So maybe in English or in Chinese it sounds very 诗情画意, but in another dialect it's choy, you know, right? So okay.
This is going to speak.
Okay, final comments from our 3 distinguished panelists. Anything to talk about the likes of Meituan and the last mile, you know, fulfillment? Anything to add? Especially on the food side?
I'll leave it to the food section.
Meituan, Ele.me, it's almost an everyone. The thing about delivery app, the delivery platforms in China, it went way ahead. Was ahead of us. Yeah, Deliveroo, Uber Eats back then, or we were lagging behind in terms of payment methods, in terms of the reason why Meituan, Ele.me is so well received and everyone uses the sheer size of their delivery fleet. They had a lot of drivers, and the delivery fee is as low as $3 renminbi. I'm referring to renminbi. They can deliver 1 cup. Just 1 cup of bubble tea. That perhaps explain the size. But you can order, you don't need to leave your house. Meituan and Ele.me, even before pandemic, it was already very well used. During this pandemic, I understand that the government is now trying to, they're scrutinizing their cost structures and all that. Yeah, so Yeah, so in a way, things have also evolved now.
Yes.
But if you're as an F&B operator in China, I mean, this is Meituan and Ele.me and perhaps other platforms that might have come up during these 2-3 years. You got to look at opportunities in them. It's huge. The market is huge.
That's right. Okay, blah blah blah. This one is this is from the association again, so no problem. And then, okay, so with that, we just want to thank you. Any questions from the floor? Because make full use of their combined wisdom, and yeah, don't give chance. Just shoot.
Direction.
Any question? Okay, there we go.
So how has the COVID pandemic and the lockdown experience affected your business? And know that we will know when China is going to ease the restriction in the X months years. So how are you adapting?
Okay, so how are you adapting to the pandemic? Maybe now we start with Serene and then down.
So I still have a lot of friends in Shanghai, and then all that. I must say that in a way, the Singapore brand, or in fact a lot of global brands, before pandemic and after pandemic, I think there's a bit of a shift. Because during these 2-3 years, they have been pretty independent, I would say. They are looking internally for their own brands. So before 2019, I think they were, wow, you're from Singapore, you're from US, you're from UK. But now internally, they are growing many, many brands, which the locals are very supportive of as well. So in fact, the global names, some of the global names have lost their attractiveness. So this is something that I find has changed quite a bit. That's my opinion based on what's before and what's after.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So I think the last 2 years has been the most comfortable year of my life. Because prior to COVID, I've been traveling every month. I only spend 1 week a month at home. So I'm always traveling around the stores in China. So actually, how are we coping now? Half of my stores are shut, cannot open at this moment. But of course, in times of COVID, we also learn and experience many things. In the 2 years without traveling, they are more receptive to you talking to them through WeChat video. And they long gone were the days that, oh, 老板等你来先我们才谈. That is 3 months later that I go now. So now things get more, solved almost immediately. They are okay with video conferencing. So that's a good part. And secondly, about consumer behavior, now is still too early to tell. Before this lockdown, they still are behaving relatively similar to pre-COVID times. But now it's really a very strict lockdown, as well as we don't know whether they will bounce back like what Singapore experienced. They put out pent up demand, want to buy this, want to buy that, want to buy everything in the world. And if Chinese start to buy everything in the world, we will be short of a lot of things. So we don't know whether that will happen or not. So I believe that now we are just trying to tie over this period, hopefully 1 or 2 months time. In China, we are not suffering so much losses because of we don't pay rent and manpower through the dealership model. So we are also not hoping that they cannot survive also, which will be a huge impact for us. So I think it is time to go back to the drawing board, whether traditional plans like for us, 2019 is supposed to hit, no, 2020 is supposed to hit 100 stores in China. But because of COVID, the 2 years, we have put all this on hold and trying to help our dealers. I earn less, they earn less, then everybody just survive through this period. This is our mood. And I think in, now we are experiencing new norm. Hopefully China, when they are relaxed, there is some kind of change in their normal daily routine, which we have yet to experience. We don't know whether they will start working from home or be encouraged to, stay at home or they fear now they go shopping mall, then suddenly cannot lock down. Yeah, so maybe they will start working from home, we don't know. And then maybe traditional mindset of having 100, 1,000 locations in China may not be the best model in the future anymore. probably we have to go on omni-channel using online to, give the first touch point to consumers, and then having a large experience store in each city will do. Don't have to, every corner must have a shop. That is traditional planning. So I think a lot of things will change. Singapore, definitely we have changed our model already, but in China, we have yet to, understand what is going to happen. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, organizer has told me. Okay, so thank you so much, but do feel free to interact with us with any questions and what have you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will just do a short intro myself. My name is Jeff Quek. I'm a director representing the Singapore Chinese Chamber of SCCI. I've just come back from China last year after 17 years in China. And while I was in China, I worked as a general manager of Tencent for 13 years. Yeah, the other 4 years were doing brand consultancy. So I thought about what I should share today for the next 20 minutes, and I decided to do something a bit more macro. The first thought was to do a China media landscape and talk about social media and how we can do some marketing. But because Rosalind, right? Yeah, we'll be talking about marketing, so I decided to switch it around a bit. So it will be a bit macro, but I think we can still learn the lesson of localization, adaptation, and speed. Yeah. So China has been at the forefront of the consumer technology. Serene mentioned that earlier, Meituan. WeChat is a super app which Grab is trying to emulate. Then we have Alibaba with the e-commerce, which has now planted their outposts in our country, in Southeast Asia with Shopee and and Lazada. So consumer tech is something we can learn from China, and one of the best ways to do well in China is to learn from a Chinese company. So today I'm just going to talk about smart retail, and the case example I'm going to use is Shein. Yeah, I want to check how many of you heard of this brand Shein. Okay, so about maybe 30-40% haven't heard of it. Yeah, so today you get to meet Shein in this deck. Yeah, so I just want to kind of narrow down, because there's so many things we can talk about, but I just want to narrow down to just what is smart retail. It's using technology slash data slash code, whatever, to make in-demand product. So not what product you're selling now, but what product will be demanded that are cost efficient. Okay, I'll explain later. That's the back end. The front end is one, enabling the shopping experience to be engaging and seamless. And I'll show that also, back end and front end. All right. So before I go there, I will just do a comparison. Then you have a better idea of who they are. So the first two brands, everybody knows, right? I want to start with the founder. Okay. So the first two are the top 10 richest men in Europe. Spain and so bet you don't know how, bet you don't know the founder, right, of Shein, right? Apparently there are only six photographs of him online, yeah. And then there are two that same name, but it's not him, yeah. All right. Anyway, he's a very secretive guy. But while these two are actually businessmen, he's a search engine engineer. So he's an SEO engineer. So that gives you the difference already of how they see retail. Of course, this is very old, quite old company. This is very new. This got hundreds and hundreds of outlets. This one got no outlet. All right, but the market value of Shein is 4 times that of Zara and H&M. Yes, he become Luckin Coffee, then all the sales are fake, then nothing to talk about. In fact, I can talk about a bit of Luckin Coffee also. It's not in the slide, but because you mentioned it, I'll just later I'll do it. Yeah. Go on, yeah. So they're not popular just in China. They're popular in US, and if you look at all, some European country, they are leading by a mile, yeah. A brand, yeah. Amazing, right? You can tell by the picture. So the SKU is crazy, right? And that it's not there all the time, yeah. It's providing the choice, which is what the Gen Z likes, and anybody likes for that matter. Yeah, more choice and cheaper. What is there not to like? Yeah, you can't beat that, right? Yeah. So how did they keep costs low? So that's what some of it are not applicable for us mere mortals, but that we can draw from it. Yeah. Okay. But which one is these are the best one, the best selling apparel last month. Okay. One is I would say original. One is the first one that came out, and then the Shein is the one that came out a bit late. So which one do you think is Shein? You think it's the right side? Why? More stylish? Okay. But I want to hear your answer.
The left one.
He said right, if I say left, right? Actually, it's this one. Yeah. This is Simonette. Yeah. But Simonette actually has a environmentally friendly material, but that's not the point today. The point is these are what they're selling for. So if you're Gen Z and you want to buy that, yeah. Anything? Albert, want to say something inside?
No, I said I saw him wear this.
Oh, okay. All right. So we know another side of you here. Okay. You can see it's not the same, but the same. So how did they do it? They disrupted the entire fashion supply chain. Yeah. So I'm going to go from, Camille, can explore this. Maybe you're already studying it, but yeah, you can add on to it later. Yeah. So how do they know what is in demand? There's no fashion guru there. It's only Max Guru. So they study 10,000, all this, which is the one that is trending. Fully, right? So you saw earlier, right? They have to adapt a bit, right? So they got this upcoming designer who wants to make a mark to design, and so you get the design out. Yeah. So this is how it's done on WeChat. I don't know how they do internally because I haven't got very close with them yet, but it's how we do it at WeChat. So WeChat has 1 billion pictures posted daily. Yeah. So we want to know what's the most popular color of the whole year. I don't have to do a research. And the entire, pictures on WeChat using Pantone, then I'll know already. So the Pantone is the code. You can understand that, not so difficult. Some other are more difficult coding, but simple coding, you can understand that. Tell me what the color, yeah. So you get the most popular colors. So that's how you scan. I just want to give a bit of glimpse into how AI works, not just say AI, So this is how it works here. So you see the word agile, right? Yeah, words that you all use, right? So they are very agile. So there are 3,000 manufacturers. I don't know how they manage. I'm not the spokesman. Yeah, it's just that I happen to know friends who works in there. There are 3,000 manufacturers, but they don't order a lot. So what I understand from him was that if there were 7 colors and 7 manufacturers, Zara will say, I bet on red, so 2,000. No, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, 300, 300, 300, 300, right? Then they send it online. So the one that is being clicked more, right? Increase the volume, then the other stop. So that's how they save, you know, so that they won't overproduce. Yeah, but of course you must give something back. One thing I learned about China is 做事7分, sorry, 做人7分, 做事3分. Yeah. So it's being reasonable to the manufacturer. You want to do this and you better pay them earlier. So this is something that they'll talk about. You talk about being transparent, but that's also the attitude. I don't want to fleece you, you know. So this is what it is. So it's demand-led manufacturing based on data. Okay, Gen Z, right? Albert talked about it, and this is precisely their target audience. I think Rosalind can talk a lot more about how to engage them. Okay, turning them into key opinion customers. That means they are not leaders. So it's another Chinese concept, KOC, not KOL. Yeah. And then samples to try, right? And then they will post. And of course, it's mobile first. 80% of them goes mobile. So it's a very well-designed mobile app. You know? Yeah. This is, yeah, they're using TikTok, and this is how many views they get. Yeah. 4.8 billion is not a small thing. Yeah. Because you talk about localization, they're very localized. Not because they've got fashion gurus, but because they know what is trending in the country. So, yeah, so that becomes a localization mechanism for them. Yeah. Well, you know, on the left is if you go to them right now, they are doing Hari Raya, of course, right? Okay, so I use another word nimble, yeah, which are words that, but this is of course bigger scale. But how are they nimble? They move all, you know, or almost all the manufacturing, you know, to Guangzhou where it ships off the fastest. Yeah. How are they sponsoring the cheaper prices? It's because they don't hold inventory. They say, oh, so many stocks and so cheap, you know, how to tap, you know. So they make it up with data also. So remember back end and front end. So these are very comprehensive system. I just, yeah, I don't think I can explain them, but you can imagine, you know, all the coding and all that being written for the system back end and front end. So it's a new breed of customer. So this would be something we think about, you know, who are we hitting at? Yeah, do we need to have store? I think from you talk about it, you know, maybe no stores and so on and so forth, and will cause a wider range. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Lynn. I represent Prism Digital Marketing, integrated marketing digital agency in Singapore. The company originated from Hong Kong. We're about a 12 years company. In Hong Kong, it's a group that was also co-running 3 other businesses with payment gateways to Alipay and WeChat Pay. And the other side of it, we are also a data analytics company that runs a few loyalty programs out of Hong Kong. In Singapore, we kind of started at a fairly soft timing, which is during the COVID period. So it's about 18 months ago we started. So along the way, I'll just share with you a little bit more about the brands that we have done in Singapore. Effectively, in Singapore, we have a small team, but the execution team is in Guangzhou. So like 30 of them will just be giving us a lot more on-the-ground research and also strategies on how brands in general from overseas can come into China. I have to thank my New Zealand branch because it's kind of started 1 year before me, and I kind of learned a lot of New Zealand brands are very well received in China. So like products like Manuka honey, the milk powder, the real products, you know, where they're kind of like generally after, and also the health supplements. So with that, I kind of gathered a few strategies and, you know, kind of co-shared ideas with my New Zealand partner, and we brought it to Singapore. Click it on. So when I talk about social media, where Serene said, in today's terms, or like compared to 5 years ago, brands today have to be very known in social media. There's plenty of brands, APPs in China ecosystem. There's a lot more, but I think when you come to outside of China, there's 3 that you practically need to know. One is WeChat. It's a very mature landscape where they have everything from messaging to group chats, be able to go through the mini program or even the Weishang, the V-Store. And then you have Xiaohongshu, which is up and coming, which is a brand new startup compared to all these mega giants in China. And then there's Weibo, which is more like a very established APP that's been around for years, where celebrities and major conglomerates use them as the initial social media platform. Now, when you compare these two together, there's 1.2 billion MAU, which is the monthly active users, compared to Xiaohongshu, which is up and coming. I'm going to spend a little bit more emphasis on Xiaohongshu because this is such a trending app for a lot of retailers and restaurants that are kind of being engaged by bloggers to talk about it. It's just like when TikTok, Douyin came into play, TikTok followed on through fairly quickly. And if you're the initial adopters of TikTok, you probably had a lot of good value marketing strategies that be able to convert straight away and effectively. So Xiaohongshu is the same. We kind of gather like a lot of influencers are building up, or the KOCs that are building up organic users or consumers then becoming an influencer of their own. They're starting to pick up, and I feel like it's more like a crossbreed between Instagram and Pinterest, if we have to use it to a localized term for Singaporeans. And WeChat is more like a Facebook, where you have like official store, and then also a WeChat mini program that could be migrated into a hybrid of sorts of a Facebook shop, plus a shop that can also be in there. So they are quite savvy in IT and able to transform it multiple ways. A lot of brands, when we talk to them in Singapore, I think there are 3 key points or 3 stages I like to phrase it typically. Singaporean brands like ourselves, I never lived in China myself, so I would be very hard to be able to, from a hearsay point, and not having a real-time FaceTime with people and consumers to really know what exactly is happening, or to be able to advise brands, are they really good for China? So I think this is one key point that I think being in Singapore helped me as a brand, as an agency. So I'm going to share in the next few slides about consumer research. So there's a couple of brands that kind of like say, hey, you know what, I really want to try China, man. Everyone is talking to me, Tmall. If I sell Tmall one hit wonder, I'm going to sell massive. How am I going to do that? Then I'll ask, is your product ready? Do you think the Chinese people like the product? Or do you think that the price point is good enough for the China market? Or where do you think is your key hero products that, wow, one hit wonder, one go, you want 1:100 times you pay your marketing, you're going to come 100 times. So, you know, there are a lot of questions in your head. You don't really know where to start because it's so big. You don't even know tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 city, or what kind of price points or what platforms you want to use. So then we go through consumer survey. We get about 30 people in Singapore, Chinese-based Chinese nationalities based in Singapore while working white-collar groups and whatnot, and then give a bunch of e-surveys, and then after that we'll go on with a focus group where we can bring them either to your shop or to your restaurant, and we can share a little bit more on how to tweak to the marketing strategies that we could do, and then be able to use also where your shops are based. Being a Singapore brand, you would probably have a location, a shop or restaurant, and then be able to get all these bloggers or KOCs to talk about it. Then you bring all this organic flow into the APP itself, and also to build a brand following from there. I think this is typically a very stage 1 for a lot of people who doesn't have contacts with China, or you are thinking about it. You want to test some water and do a litmus test to see whether it works for you as a brand. So these are the three areas or 3 APP. I think it's very relevant to give it a test. And I think the entry of going into this kind of strategy is fairly a lower cost than directly parking yourself all the way with a TP partner and you being a Tmall, Taobao, because that requires a lot of money and also with IP, I think you need to have all your paperwork in place, like what the lawyers have mentioned, to do your trademarks and to get it all ready. And then from experience, it takes typically 1 to 2 years to get your IP and trademarks all ready. So before that happens, if you have a vision in mind, and if your first step, happens, and it's definitely a second approach where you can go list yourself on Taobao, Tmall, or JD. With media buy, campaigns, and KOC, KOL, PR, like they call it the PR in China, then you're able to have more leads generation in terms of your brand following. And also in terms of franchise opportunities, I think being seen on social media and being trending on social media makes it a lot more easier for people to come and say, hey, your brand is trending in Singapore. Have you ever thought of coming to China? It at least opens up the conversations and that door, and being ready for people to come and approach you when the time is right. And then the last step, when you have your own social media being popular and trending on a social media space, and you having a channel of sorts to be able to sell it, I think lastly then is, how can I do CRM? How can I control all my database? Because Chinese people don't have website. They don't have, I don't know, they don't like to be called for reasons or SMSs, notifications and whatnot, until you have like a very severe thing that, oh, this is your birthday month, I give you like $20. Oh, then they'll come and respond to your SMS and say, yeah, I come get it. So then, at the final stage is where your CRM comes into play, and there are different channels of doing CRM. If you are stuck with Tmall, obviously you have your own Tmall CRM system that you can put in play. In a bigger spot, it's more like if you want to compare to like Shopify. So like you're able to buy plugins, and you can do plugins with different developers or APPs members, then you can be able to build a very robust CRM system. Otherwise, like if you're already on the normal social media apps like WeChat or Red, you will also be able to have your own CRM system. And that eventually can propel you to a bigger market share by advertising. Because advertising is also a big chunk of money that's going to be an output. So I've requested the names to be shared because I asked my clients if I could do that. So they kindly let me use their name. So Porcelain Spa is a brand that is available in the second generation brand for years in Singapore. Mother started the business as a facial salon. Then the daughter came along the way and expanded it with technology and skincare products. Like with them, they obviously have worked with ESG already on a few programs on MRA expansions into outside of the markets, and even rebranding of the logos and the products and packaging. So, they already have a vision that they want to be outside of Singapore. Within Singapore, everybody knows that, the $2,000 per month advertising dollar is just going to be maxed out. There's no more, you're swimming in the aquarium sort of, you can't expand more. And they know the fact and said, you know what, I want to go try China, but I don't know how. I have a plan, I already have a TP in place. We're going to probably list the product, but I don't know what product to go. So this is exactly where I think they got stuck. They have no Chinese customers. I said, okay, look, and I know Pauline quite well myself. I said, let's give it a try. I'll get the 30 women in. We put up an e-survey, 30 questions. Really work on what you want to know. What kind of products work out of your 20 SKU, 30 SKU? What is your key 5 SKU you really want to bang your money on, right? And then after that, what kind of, do you think that the Chinese people will be receptive to the moisturizers? Are they thick enough for the climate for China? Because we are Southeast Asia, the products that we use wouldn't be as heavy. So, there are questions in our mind, which are the key hero products that we want to sell? And number 2, what kind of category you want to fight in? You want to fight in the La Mer space, luxury, or you want to fight in the organic space? There are so many categories in the SEO, or even in Tmall. What kind of a category you want to be able to fight in? So you find a niche area to go in so that you swim accordingly with your money spent correctly as well. So we did both parts. We did the e-survey, and we also invited 10 of them to go into the shop itself to really go through the test, see the place, test the service, test the machines that they have, and eventually, be able to share the experience again with their Chinese people who are living in Singapore. So why I keep emphasizing Singaporeans in Singapore. So according to WeChat Pay numbers, they are obviously listed to several payment agencies as well. I think we interpolate the numbers to be closer to 400,000 Chinese people living in Singapore. So the white collar workers are obviously on the rise, like the Facebook, Twitter, and whatnot. They are all coming in, or the IT related fields, the startups, bio scientists. So there are a lot, and even the bankers. So there's a lot of these white collar workers here in Singapore that are really well-heeled, under the super high net worth, a few levels down, but they are still really well-heeled Chinese individuals who live in the Singapore system, who have like even met through in the universities in Singapore, and they got together. So, you know, when we started speaking to all of these people and doing the focus group, we found out that there's actually a larger pool of people that is already available in Singapore. So what is useful here in this scenario is Porcelain get to have new leads at the same time, number one. And number two, the key takeaway is my sales staff ready to talk to them in Chinese and give them the service that they want? Am I able to talk about my product in Chinese properly to them, to describe this facial treatment plus the product? So is my team ready? And this kind of give them a litmus test. You know, are we ready? Can we do this better? And things like that, so that we can cover a little bit more ground on Singapore, the local based Chinese people. So I think this is what we did with them, and I think it's an important step for a lot of new brands who wants to venture into China. I'll skip past this slide because I think I just spoke about Xiaohongshu already. It's a popular app that is on the rise, and they are actually coming to Singapore. So I think we have already started talking to a lot of 探店博主 who are interested to talk, to be able to share which companies are already using them and be able to do a bigger outreach to Singapore and Malaysia. This is another brand, which is a kids clothing brand called Le Petit Society. They are based in Paragon. They have a shop, and they also have a shop at Mandarin Gallery downtown. So they first started off in Hong Kong, then they moved back to Singapore, and they have been doing very well on their social media, in Instagram and Facebook. Every time they run a campaign or they do an activity of sorts, there's a lot of mummies who always want to bring their kids and buy either their new collections or their Chinese New Year collection. Now, again, being in Paragon, she said, you know, I always see a lot of Chinese people coming in. I want to know how to target them too. So I said, let's start with social media. We are also working with them on an ESG grant for the bigger scale to go into China at some point in time. So with that, we did influencer marketing with them via Xiaohongshu. I'll show you a clip on how we work with a media page in Singapore where this lady who writes a lot of blogs in her WeChat, and we basically
Hello， 大家好，我是辛巴。今天我来到了乌节路位于Paragon 的中心5楼啊，发现了一间宝藏的亲子品牌，里面的衣服都超级好看的。马上要过年了，最好大家要穿的一模一样，这样才能够红红火火过新年，对不对？所以我们一起去看吧。哇，这是爸爸的，这是妈妈的，这是姐姐的，这是妹妹的，这是哥哥的，红的、绿的、橙的，适合过年的，这里都有，全家人的都有哎，真的是，简直是不要太好看了好吗？这是我自己搭配的今年的这个亲子装，你喜欢吗？
Kitty money Coco。
这是我跟小男神的亲子装，你们看帅不帅？好看吗？我跟星星都很喜欢哦。新年穿新衣，祝大家新年快乐，恭喜发财！谢谢。哇，今年终于有新衣服穿啦，我已经买好啦，拜拜。
小红书
grow them organically. Growing influencers or growing following on Xiaohongshu is very hard compared to WeChat. WeChat is so much more robust because it's such a mature ecosystem, and through advertising you are able to really capture the right kind of people looking into your WeChat store or WeChat page. However, for Xiaohongshu, you really need the kind of demographic that will tune into your brand. So for Xiaohongshu, the demographics usually gel more to women 18 to 35 years old, and 85% or more of these are women, not men. So products that kind of go well with experience, female products, cosmetics, typically things that are of beauty, I think would gel really, really well on the Xiaohongshu space. And I have also come to an understanding from all my Chinese colleagues is the journey of a Chinese person when they want to find out something, say tonight I'm going to go out have a dinner with you. First thing they will go and look into their Xiaohongshu is how I will look into my Instagram hashtag nice restaurants. right? That is the first touch point. I will go in and use it as an SEO, see any organic people talking about it first, then I'll make a commitment and choose like 3 restaurants that is nice to go. Then the next step, I'll put these 3 links into my WeChat. And then I'll tell my friend in WeChat, okay, tonight we are going to go this. And the friends will then say, oh, I checked through the Xiaohongshu, I think this is good. Then you'll make a choice. And if that is good, eventually during the dinner and after the dinner, then what they'll do, take a photo and they'll post it into their moments. So when you, from a Xiaohongshu, a public environment, then you lead them to your private space, then you share it among your private network. Because Xiaohongshu is to public, it's like SEO, hashtag, you can find whatever that's related in the hashtag, you're able to see it. When it comes to WeChat, if you don't have your own following, your moments has to be all your own personal friends, it's your own network. So you have to go to a public network and then you come back to a private network. So that's why eventually for a CRM system, you still have to come back into a WeChat ecosystem. So with that, we were able to build them very quickly, but over 2 weeks, I think we got them up and running. And then we also, we are still seeding a lot of KOCs in Singapore. At the moment, thankfully, the KOCs in Singapore are still not so 摆着架子 wants to ask a lot of money, because in China, KOC costs anything from 起价开价 maybe $1,000 and above per person. So here, at least in Singapore, I think it's still a very infancy stage. People are still quite friendly. If they barter for a product, you are able to post it for free. And obviously it starts building out. The more Xiaohongshu becomes very, very popular, all these KOCs in Singapore are going to start charging money. And I'm sure it's just a matter of time. These ones, I didn't do them, but I'm picking up because I heard the database of today's attendees mostly come from F&B. And I don't have any F&B client. Most of them are retail. So these are the brands that are already on. They haven't done KO or the Xiaohongshu or the influencer management. I haven't seen them talking to bloggers to go and tan dian and go and have a look and test and do it. But you can also post a lot of organic artworks and information about your change of menu, your location, or the timing of your operations. It's still a good touch point for a lot of people when they're searching a hashtag restaurants. It should come up. This is another client of mine, Tocco Toscano, also second generation business. Parents, father set up a factory and then they sold a lot of handbags to the OLs back in those days, via Metro, Robinsons, and whatnot. And the younger generation came up and started doing new products. Like working with SIA for during the lockdown. They did with SIA with all the planes and all the things that they haven't used and take it out and do an upcycling of sorts, and then did a campaign. This is well received, and we have also worked with them with a lot of influencers in Singapore. We give it to them and let's ask them to test. The feedback came back was really good. They said, "Hey, where 哪里买?" So this is an experience. Tocco Toscano said, 哪里买? But a lot of my sales people don't know how to write in Chinese. 哪里买? Yeah, so it's impossible. They were unable to really capture the ground and said, "Wow, at one post, maybe about 20 comments come back, but my sales girl have to really go in, or I have to hire a right Malaysian sales girl that can reply in Chinese." So, you know, then as an agency, I said, okay, I'm going to provide you with community service because I have a team of people sitting in Guangzhou, right? I said, okay, you know what? If you do go big and scale big with advertising, my team can handle it. We are able to respond. We'll look through all the questions that they ask and then come back to you, and then you can see whether approved or not. So this is again one of a learning curve. Your team or someone in the team must be able to know how to read or at least approve the responses of what the third party is going to respond for you, and make sure there's no crisis on that front. And then number two, be able to express whatever the bloggers are saying. Is it right or wrong? Because they're going to give you a draft and say, hey, this is what I'm going to talk about your brand. Can I say that? Then you need to have a PR in Chinese that to tell them what can be said and what cannot be said, because your brand is your brand. You want to be able to make sure you protect it at a certain point. So this is the one I did. And Wonderly is an education and English enrichment center. We met the Lao Pan Yang a while back during lockdown. I think in last year, it was during one of the mini lockdowns, and she just taken over the spot, renovated it. It's at Claymore Connect. Unfortunately, because of the mini lockdown and all the parents were taking in and out of classes, it was impossible to get any traffic along that road. So I said, you know what, because it's English drama, I think there's a lot of Chinese interest, people living in Singapore that might want to have a look. So we worked with a media page for this in WeChat. We sent close to 124 mummies to her. And I think that's the next page. Yeah, we sent about 100 and we got like paid trials of like $45 or $55 a trial, like for a 145 mummies sign up over a course of 2 weeks, and then close to 10% of them sign up for a full package with them. So this kind of, got viral a little bit on the social media. The mummies were so excited. It's quite a nice setup, decorated, and they went in and they all shared over different things. And some of them are like a Chinese mummy married a foreigner husband. So I think that kind of also became very popular with a lot of mummies who are quite well-heeled and fluent in Singapore, and they brought all the kids in there. Yeah, so this is one of those things that we did, and I think we were really happy that we got her started on that. But again, she was saying that the request came very quickly, and many at the front staff couldn't take it. So it came after so many cases that are done, then I come to realize that, wow, when the Chinese people do want it, they want it quick and want it now. They want it now. You cannot say, oh, wait 2 days, then you reply, no, they want it now. Then if you don't deliver now or talk to them now, you're deemed not good enough. So it's important before you even get into a step of going into a social media, or have at least someone in your team that's able to handle a certain amount of Chinese. I think that is a minimum play for social media. I just wanted to share, based on some of the things that we have searched when we have done a lot of research and a lot of pitches to a lot of brands. A lot of other brands pop up in our eyeballs, but they might not be retail brands selling a product per se. It could be a service, could be a marketplace. So when we look at this, 有机超市、高端超市 or organic 精品超市, Little Farms pop up. Yeah, I think Hoover also pop up also, but these are not the brands that you cannot typically think you can sell through mini program. I think it's hard. Or you probably will find a French franchise program in China where I think their brands will take on beautifully. Confinement center, that when you after birth, you put the Malay wrap, the kind of products are associated, or this is the kind of 产后修复中心. In Singapore, there's one, I think, called Kai Suites. It's like super expensive. I think they cater also to the Chinese people. So if you get into the right channels, you can get access to them. Maternity and baby care, Hegan and Mother Works, they're both in China as well. You can also easily access to all these via social media. And because we are in a first part of the conversation on the conference today, we mentioned about IP and trademark. It's also very imperative for brands to have it ready for social media account opening. When you're doing an OA, official account opening for WeChat or even a Xiaohongshu, they will need to 商标认证. That gives you the blue tick, like Instagram blue tick. If you do not have your trademark ready, they will just board you on, but you might not be able to have the verified tick. So consumers in China might think that, oh, are you not the business owner, or is this a real account? They might even find it suspicious and might not want to do anything with your account. So this 商标认证 is fairly important. So it's good to maybe have a trademark ready for your brand logos. They accept the Singapore trademark. Yeah, but I think there is another way. Their internal systems do also accept a Chinese trademark. It gives them a better confidence when it comes to a later stage in terms of advertising accounts opening, and also for 入驻的 Tmall and Taobao. Basic supplies. These two brands is available in ION. So I think not the hardcore education system, but the sphere around it, the products surrounding the enrichment services. I think these kind of products, if you are in it, I think it will also be a very attractive play. Snacks, food and beverages, Irvin salted egg and Bengawan Solo. So I think also there's another point that my colleagues always bring up is, before I even want to come to Singapore, I need to know what are the what's the souvenir I should come and buy. So I must know you first before I even go to Singapore. Even when I book my air ticket, I must know what am I supposed to buy and bring back home and do as a gifting souvenir for my friends. So all my friends already been to Singapore and tell me what to buy. So I guess there are a few key points, even if you do not think to cross the border that quickly, building a brand following or letting China people know about your brand existence in Singapore is also very important, because I mean, now that we are all on COVID timing, when we look past that, when borders do open up, I think you do want them to come to you and then give it a try as well. And again, for the enrichment classes, I think it's also another area that is very popular. So yeah, so I kind of like covered the first two parts of it. The first part of it, meeting in Singapore, where you can get access to readily people in Singapore, and then, you know, getting them on your social media and building the fan following. And then the next step is I wasn't cleared for this coffee brand for announcing their brand name. So a coffee brand that we did, they are already now selling in Tmall. I think they have just recently opened a branch in France. And also they are working through this channel at the moment, WeChat, content management and advertising, Weibo. We did a few campaigns on them so that they can direct them to their Tmall traffic, to the Tmall store, and then also through Raid on a giveaway campaigns. When it comes to your stage 2, when you have built your own number of brand followers and also a certain amount of brand awareness among the Chinese community, be it in Singapore or in China, the next step is going through doing all the campaigns. And campaigns are the only way to really rise up the number of fan following that you want. The other things that we have done also through leads generation, we work with a New Zealand real estate company. Now, New Zealand is a very good case study for me to study. Why so? For all the Chinese immigrants that are coming to New Zealand, few things that they want to source: houses, Kai Sui Jian Fei, electrical company, and then bank account, Kai Hu Kou, and then schools for the kids, right? So these are the few key elements when they come to New Zealand as an immigrant. Singapore not so hard because you can speak both languages, but when they go to New Zealand, they really, wow, you need someone in the ecosystem built in for them in Chinese. So, you know, so when we did with them for the lead generation for this particular company, so it's equivalent to our PropNext. So we work with them on getting the leads generation. We put a lot of organic educational content, like, oh, in New Zealand, they cut rates or they rise rates, therefore the mortgage rates is attractive at this moment, or you're talking about what is the latest trend. Now this house at the coast sold at don't know what price. Yeah. So this kind of educational, but kind of a headline grabber kind of information gels very well to them, and they like, because they have a keen interest in coming down to settle. So with a lot of educational kind of information on home buying or renting for both students and investors, then I think this kind of Chinese ecosystem, in particular WeChat, works really well for that. And then the last step for e-commerce, when we talk about mini program, just now one of the speakers earlier on talked about the mini program being the franchisee falsely using their brand logo and put it up in mini program. So I don't have a full story for that, but you know, in general, I just wanted to share a little bit more on mini program. There's also when you have a WeChat on your phase 1 and phase 2, when you're building up your own system, for brands who need to sell, is able to build an e-store at the back end. And in Singapore, you can actually do that. You can open up an e-store, and then you can be able to have a plugin with a WeChat Pay gateway, and then you can receive, like how you can list your product on Tmall, you're able to receive the money into the bank account straight away. So you can also, we have also tested the flow for a refund as well. So this is not a problem if you are thinking that, oh, you need to have a bank account in China and you know how hard it is. So in fact, I think we have kind of the last few years managed this system and the flow with the payment agents, payment companies in Singapore that have grown massively. This problem kind of fixed it by itself already over the years. So, and this is also the health supplements that we were talking about that we were able to sell from New Zealand with the mini program. And then with TWG, we didn't work with them, but we kind of associated. They have a very robust CRM system. So on the CRM system, at the very last stage, I wanted to close the whole conversation here was when you have a big following in terms of brand, and you already have a lot of customers visiting you, eventually for the management of your CRM is, I think, very painful for a lot of people who wants to get in. Maybe we are not attached we don't really have an attachment in China where you can handle the data very well. And in fact, I think we are all very scared because of personal data setting that they have in China. We just do not know, or being Singaporean, we are just very conservative. We don't know when can to use it and not to use it. Or we are being told not to be able to use it all the time, right? So I think by having your own data system and being able to keep it or convert it in at the back end, eventually to your own data system to keep, it's a very wise thing. But yeah, so I wanted to close it off to tell you that there are functions of having a CRM, because a few times a lot of customers came back and said, how do I build a CRM system? Sorry, I went for Your Hub saying they have a very strong system on Tmall for their CRM program. So that's another Taobao eShop that I wanted to show you from New Zealand. We were also working with them for all the herbals and herbals kind of supplements that they were selling. And we also represented Winghua mooncakes in Hong Kong. And this is one of the HK with the Maofaji in Hong Kong. We also work with them to list out all the products. So with this, we also went in to talk to Made with Passion in Singapore, because we had a run of this and we know how to do it. So I also introduced that to Made with Singapore. And Xiaohongshu rate. So this is something that at the moment is quite jieshou for me. Why? Because a lot of people are coming to say, I want to have a Xiaohongshu account. Everybody wants to build content. Everybody wants to kickstart on this. But unfortunately, because Xiaohongshu is such a startup company mindset where they change all their settings and regulations every other day, it makes it very hard for me as an overseas agency to capture what exactly is the right thing to do. For example, a blogger can pull an information. If they tag it differently or they write a keyword that is routed differently, it's already neglected and not allowed to be posted. So it becomes a little bit of a frustration. But even if it comes to the back end to be able to open a shop, this is a Perfect Diary is a local brand in China, and they have a Xiaohongshu shop, and they are run. Well, I've spoken to my onshore. They are run very well, but obviously the back-end infrastructure is not as good as WeChat Mini program, where you're able to customize it to a certain extent. So this one is still like the kind of a behavior as a company as Xiaohongshu is still a very startup stage, you know. So for this part here, for the Xiaohongshu e-commerce, we're also doing some kind of a test to make sure that the test of flow for the payments and for the refunds is able to do it as quickly as how WeChat Mini program can do. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to share with you, my experience with Singaporean brands and how Singaporean brands can have their first baby steps into social media in China.
Shivan, any questions for?
Well, I think for Lin wise, maybe Lin, you can share with us what other services that you offer.
So we are an integrated marketing agency. So not only we cover Chinese marketing, because we have a execution arm in China, we also do the normal social media content creation for the Western specs like Facebook, Instagram. We also do video production. We have a small team in-house that we are able to provide some video consultancy and do production as well. Especially social media these days is all about videos, especially good quality videos that can be churned and be able to reinforce them in different platforms. So if you can have one nice video, or you can cut it many ways to social media cut downs and then put it to the social media in the Western and then plus the Chinese ecosystem as well. So yeah, so that's the kind of services a typical agency. We are available in New Zealand. We have a branch there. We also have my head office is in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong, Singapore, and New Zealand.
And also in Guangzhou.
And also in Guangzhou. So if you want to do onshore experiments of anything, video or doing a physical activation or PR, you can also do it in Guangzhou.
Raja? Now your slides, there are a lot of Xiaohongshu, but I do not see any Douyin.
Douyin, no, Douyin is not available outside of China. Douyin is only available in China. So TikTok is the English version in Singapore. Reason why I don't talk about TikTok is they are very fast moving content, very fast, and most of the time it doesn't convert for sales. because it's too fast. There's no, and the call to action for promotion doesn't work as well.
So you prefer the use of reaching out is
Xiaohongshu and WeChat, because you can still do promotions, you run promotions, and that's what, when you're selling things, it works the best. But TikTok in outside of China is more towards branding and gaining awareness of your brand, or you have a new product or the brand per se.
But the bulk of the traffic is going to China right now, to such an extent that WeChat is also launching their video service.
The live streaming, is it?
No, not only the live streaming, the static video and the live stream. The majority of the volume of the traffic is and then such an extent that WeChat also launched their own video services, which is
Weishi. Oh. I think for me, most of the clients that we have been talking haven't gone that massively up the learning curve or the knowledge of the usage of that. I mean, even when you talk about WeChat live streaming and flowing the live streaming and going into WeChat mini program, even among the retailers in Singapore, I myself are facing problems. The challenge is not able to find a Chinese nationality passport in Singapore. And that's why it hasn't as taken off as quickly. There's only one or two probably in Singapore, but it's just not, it's not deep enough the market for me to use it. Even the choices of KOC and KOL is just not the pool is not big enough for me to tap on. The bigger pie, you still have to go back to China and do it and work with the content, to build the content of such over there.
Let me get over a bit. Yeah, I think all of us have seen videos on Li Ziqi.
Li Ziqi.
Ziqi, yeah. So do you think, companies that have products can sort of, go on this route where, constantly it's about one person and how she lives and how she cooks. I mean, in your opinion, is this a good model to follow?
Well, I think in terms of sales, it helps. But for the money that you're putting in, even for Tmall, for one of the clients who went on to Tmall, to be able to fluff up the brand as a newcomer into the Tmall marketplace, they also approach some of these key hot influencers, and they have a very long standing contract with these people and say, look, we this month we're coming out with this new brand, Ruzhu, into my Tmall. We give a special price to all these brands, and that's how they have access to give a shout. So in terms of brand, shouting out the brand awareness and be able to tell them, what is this brand, follow me, and then at the same time give a certain promotion on the site so that we can have access to you at a cheaper price. I think these two are the main KPIs or objectives when people are using this kind of influencers. Would they still continue to use it? I think the answer is yes, because I feel it's relentless. It's that kind of human behavior. They want to see more human acting out, and I think this kind of acting or influencing is still one of the key marketing strategy, that whatever APP you're on, it still becomes a very relevant and trendy strategy. What do you think?
Yeah. Are you referring to the one live streaming one? Is that the one growing plants and all that? Yeah.
I don't know about that one.
Yeah. So he's this famous live streamer. He grows his own organic plants and then sell them. Yeah. So she is very expensive because when I was in China, a couple of brands tried to get her. Yeah. And she is also very selective. But live streaming is a chicken and egg. It's good when you get the popular one, but it's very, very expensive. Yeah.
Jeff? For the Jeff, but sorry, I didn't get on.
Jeff.
Jeff, yeah. The case that you talk about Shein is very inspiring. It's basically another minor kinds of data on a daily basis, then convert them into products, and then selling them at so low a price that you can't use this. And it kind of touches me because I'm taking a data mining courses. 7 days. And then you did mention about locking using heat map to target. I have that map. It's a paid app that pays and you can get a geographical heat map of a certain space so that you can pinpoint where is the preferred build. Now, can you maybe share a few more apps or websites that Shein may be using to buy all this data?
They've got 1,000 websites, so they will go to Zara, H&M, and all the others that you saw.
So they probably write their own app to capture all the pictures and then what color sell, what color don't sell.
Yeah. You can call it an app or you can call it algorithm. Then they crawl, they crawl and then they pull back. Yeah. So depending on who blocks it, but if you design such a way that you can crawl through and then bring back. Basically, visually it's like that. You go there and get back the thing and then bring back home. Then you look at it at home.
最后一个问题。Now I'm going to do the 七鬼花，几下，能下。Okay, so note takers, thank you very much for spending time with us. We hope you have, learned something, go away with some valuable knowledge and contacts, and please keep in touch and keep the Singapore flag flying high. Thank you.